Regular meeting to order, and if everybody could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And with that, we're on to item 2, which is any changes to the order of the agenda and a request from the public, staff, or council. I do note that for council, we have several speaker slips on item 11B, and that what we may want to just move that up under new business. Would that be the right place to just make swap 11A and B?
That would be appropriate, I think, yes.
Okay. Council amenable to that?
Yep.
Yes. All right, so we will do that. Any other changes to the order of the agenda, requests from staff or from the public? Okey doke, I think is the official response to that. So we'll move on to item number 3, report from closed session.
Nothing to report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. And with that, we're on to council communications and announcement number 4. Start down here to my left. Councilmember Grocott, any updates?
Nothing major. I would report that I attended the celebration of the Rosner House, 30 years of operation, and folks in Menlo Park probably know about Rosner House better than we do, but it is part of the Peninsula Volunteers Association, and when we did the Meals on Wheels, that's Peninsula Volunteers. And, of course, Rosner House is open to anybody in San Mateo County that wants to use their services. It is for elderly and folks who have dementia or Alzheimer's are the patients that use that facility. But anyways, I attended their 30-year birthday party, if you will.
Very good. Councilmember Royce, back from vacation. Anything you want to make us jealous of?
Kind of, yes. Just one quick announcement. Our Healthy Cities program, which has been around several years in the city of San Carlos, helping our children, has their annual recognition evening the Wednesday, the 28th. That'll be 7 p.m. at Central Middle School.
That's tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night. So I want to congratulate ahead of time all those people that do plan to attend.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Ahmad?
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to let everybody know that Vertical Challenge is going to be going on at the Hiller Aviation Museum in June. People should go out and volunteer. It's going to be a great couple of days with lots and lots of helicopters.
Great. Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Grisilli?
2 items. Number 1, I'd like to announce to the council and actually to the public this Thursday at 9 o'clock in the morning at the Foster City Council chambers, there'll be information given on by 4 bidders for the new garbage contract. I attended last Thursday when we had the 7 bidders for the transfer station, and it was interesting. This week will be the 4 bidders for the garbage contract. There are no dollars, no amounts said or anything like that. It's just information about each company, and everyone's invited to attend. Again, 9 o'clock on Thursday at the Foster City Council chambers. And the other thing I'd like to report is that today I attended an event here in this chamber for the installation of 2 new sergeants and 4 new police officers for the city of San Carlos. 2 of those new employees are laterals from other agencies, and 2 new, as you would call, I guess, rookies, and then 2 current members that were promoted to sergeant. So it was quite a nice event, and again, we again are blessed with a lot of great experience and a lot of great enthusiasm and a lot of great professionalism in our police department. So I just want to report that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Mr. Grisilli speaking reminded me of one other thing that he and I both were a part of, and that was it was just a matter of course, but we did have a fire board meeting where we ratified the budget, which we just want to thank the council here and the council in Belmont, because that's how it's really done, is approved by the 2 councils, and then it comes back to us for ratification, and we did do that at our last fire board meeting.
Great. And from my standpoint, just so council knows, as a liaison of Park and Rec Commission, I had a meeting with the chair, Gordy Burton, and we had a nice meeting and conversation, sort of compared agendas and notes and so forth. And then the other thing, I guess, is everybody, I think, was a part of Hometown Days, which was not all that long ago. And I want to just congratulate everybody, all the volunteers. It was quite a few days of activity. I thought it was great. I mean, I think the whole city loves it. I know that I love it. Linda Tuchel and her group did a phenomenal job. And you know, how about Genevieve and Choo Choo Soul? I mean, how good does that get? That's fantastic. So congratulations to everybody that was involved in that. It was great. And it's nice to be first in the parade. Yeah. Thanks. Well, you got a car this year, okay? You weren't in the...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor,
All
for
right.
the car. Thank you, Mr. Carr.
And with that, we'll move on to item number 5, which are council appointments. And this is the consideration of reappointing Joanna Wassa to the Planning Commission for a term ending May 31st, 2011.
Mr. Mayor, I'll take that for you.
Thank you, Ms. Boland.
In your packet, there's a recommendation to reappoint Ms. Iwasa to the Planning Commission for an additional 3 years. She is willing to serve another term, and that's a staff recommendation.
Great. Thank you very much. Council?
I just have one question on that. Do we have term limits on that position?
Yes, we do, 9 years,
9 years.
3-year terms.
Okay.
And I could just speak personal experience of being on the planning commission with her. She puts a lot of work into it, very detailed oriented. And in addition to planning, she also is part of our residential design, which is every other week reviewing all new home construction. And so she puts a lot of time in as a volunteer and does a super job.
Great. Council?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to reappoint Joanna Wassa to the Planning Commission for a term ending May 31st, 2011.
Second.
Ms. Boland?
Councilmember Mod, Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Mayor Lewis?
Yes. And with that, we move on to item number 6A, and that's presentation of a plaque to outgoing Parks and Rec Commissioner Carol Taylor for her 9 years of service on the commission. So shall we go down to the podium?
Yes. Oh, she's here.
Intercepting him.
Working? Is this working? I need a I need a handheld, but that'll go into my stand-up routine, which, you know, I'm only here till 11. Tell your friends. Sorry. I just want to say that I had the opportunity to work with Carol Taylor for, I think, 4 years on the Park and Rec Commission. She's as dedicated a commissioner as you could ask for. She does her homework. When you get into discussion about things, Carol's going to make sure that you have a thorough discussion about all aspects of that, as I'm sure other commissioners can attest. And she's always had the welfare of the city at the forefront of her arguments. One of the things I've always appreciated about Carol is her passion and compassion for everybody in San Carlos, the commitment from tots to tennis to all of her different passions in town. And she puts her time where her mouth is, which is about the best thing that you can say for our great volunteers in San Carlos, and Carol has been a great volunteer in the commission. So everybody, I have this plaque for Carol, present as a lasting symbol of our appreciation of your most valuable contributions to the city of San Carlos for a term from 1999 to June of 2008. Congratulations, and thank you very much.
And I just want to thank all of the council. I know that the time that I put in during this tenure was probably just less than what each of you puts in one single year. And it's given me really a new appreciation for the whole process of citizens' involvement in government and how important it is. So I'm delighted that so many of you are here tonight, and keep coming. It does make a difference. So thank you.
All right, and with that, we have a presentation of a check from the Parks and Rec Foundation of San Carlos for the Burton Park Playground renovation project.
Mayor Lewis and members of the City Council, it is my distinct honor and pleasure to be able to introduce to you the Parks and Recreation Foundation that has been working so hard for this community. As you know, we put together an alternative fund development program a couple years ago to seek private sector funding, and this is the first project, and it has been a success. And with that, I'd like to call up Howard Goldstone, the president of the Parks and Recreation Foundation of San Carlos, for introductions of his board of trustees and presentation of a significant size check.
Can that check fit in the door, Barry, or do you have the truck out front?
Are you skeptical, Mr. Mayor?
No, sir.
This evening we have Debbie Denton with us and Cameron Miller. Anybody else on the board here? I think that's it. But two of the better members of the board.
These are the better members?
We have a lot of members. They're better because they showed up tonight. But we would like to present you, Mr. Mayor, with this check. Cardboard check. It's our pleasure to give you this check for $303,000.
Well, I just want to thank Director Weiss and for everybody on the Park and Rec Foundation board, commission, and city, everybody who sort of embraced this thing and put it together. This is fantastic, and just as soon as we get the stuff going up on the Burton, I'll meet you at the top of the slide, Howard. How's that?
I'll be there.
All right. All right. And with that, we will move on to item number 7, which is public comment. And this is for persons wishing to address the City Council on matters not on the posted agenda. And each speaker is limited to 2 minutes. So, Clint Evans, would you please?
I think this may be on your agenda. I just want to thank Mr. Grocott for standing up for me and probably half of the city in encouraging you not to sign the mayor's letter for the global warming, how do I say it nicely, big lie. I think it's all a scam, and I urge you not to sign it. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Grocott.
Thank you very much. And with that, Pat Bell.
Pat Bell, San Carlos. I have a couple of things, 3 if I have time. I think it's inappropriate for a senior staff person to say to a citizen that maybe we'd want to get a good candidate to replace a particular council member next year. That just doesn't seem appropriate to me. And the contract that was recently signed with the Bay Area Air Quality Management Board for this $75,000 grant, I asked for a copy today, and I got another contract with Bay Area, whatever. So I don't have it in front of me, but it says that we will deliver by June 30th the elements that you haven't hired the contractor to do yet, and the minutes and attendance and so forth from the public meeting that hasn't been scheduled yet. And so I don't understand signing a contract and saying we will deliver this by June 30th when you know very well you can't deliver it. I mean, this contract was signed in May. I assume that the people who signed it knew that they couldn't pull this off by June 30th. I just don't get it. And it seems to me that it makes the city look bad to do business that way. How am I doing for time? Do I have time for one more item?
We're at about 1 minute 30 right now.
Okay. I'm at about 1 minute 30, or I have 1 minute 30?
You have 30 seconds.
I'll save it till next time. I didn't attend Hometown Days because it wasn't accessible. And I'll give you the details next time around.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. And with that, Jeff Peterson.
Good evening, council members.
I founded a biotech business here about 9 years ago, but fell in love with this community for all the friends made here through tennis. I am currently serving as a volunteer public relations director for the San Carlos Tennis Club, in addition to several other roles that I fulfill for them. It came to our attention not long ago that as part of the cost control measures for the city, the decision was made to cut off the lighting of tennis courts in San Carlos effective July 1st. This comes to about $3.42 per court per night through the year in San Carlos. The Park and Rec Department is also cutting staff dramatically as part of these same measures. They do not have the capacity to handle ad hoc requests from citizens to pay and have the lights on a permit and fee basis as needed throughout the week and throughout the year. The only way that they are able to handle this per conversations with us is basically if we coordinate this and handle this on the part of the citizenry and the club members and collect money and coordinate this with the department on a monthly or perhaps as quickly as a weekly basis. They realize that it's unfair for the club to foot the $15,000 bill for lighting through the year when we are only a small fraction of all that use the courts, but of course we are about the only mechanism available to coordinate this and try and provide a solution. We have discussed a number of possibilities. The city currently limits use of courts for functions like USTA matches for which we would pay them because of court capacity. That is a potential fundraising mechanism to give us day and night access for matches for which the city would be compensated. We currently pay $10 an hour for Carlmont courts to do this. I would point out...
I'm going to have to ask you to conclude your comments.
All right. We have explored metering. We have explored locking gates with key access, having the club provide the service of running all of those services. We've been working with Barry and the team and with the commissioners to try and figure out better approaches. I'm asking this be put on the agenda of the next meeting as a formal discussion item. I'll provide a 5 to 10 minute presentation on it, and we would like to have a vote on repealing that action, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you.
And with that, we will, unless there's anybody else in public that would like to make a comment, we'll move on to item number 8. You're going to have to hurry and get to the podium here. We're almost out of time. And when you're done, if you could please fill out a speaker slip. Thank you. Oh, you did?
Yeah, it's already up there. Kate Scrable. So I'm Kate Scrable. I am a 5-year citizen of San Carlos, and I harbor no illusion here tonight that what I will say will persuade you one way or the other. But as a concerned citizen and a mother, I stand before you to share my thoughts on the Mayor's Global Climate Protection Act.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're under item number 10A,
Oh.
and this is a public speaking just for items not on the agenda. So we will call you, and we do have you listed under item 10A.
Okay, fabulous.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt. Okay, with that, we will move on to item number 8, which is the approval of the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. And council, I do have 2 speaker slips for item number 8E. So I think we will take item 8E as a separate from the consent calendar. Let's consider that removed. And then
F.
I'm sorry?
Item F.
Item F is being requested by Councilmember Grocott to be removed from consent. Any other items from council? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move for the approval of the consent calendar, items A, B, C, D, and G. Yeah, I didn't say A, B, C, D, and G.
Okay.
Second.
Christine?
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Lewis?
Yes.
Madam Mayor, Mr. Mayor, and Madam Clerk, could you just include read the title of the ordinance into the record with that motion?
8D.
Read D.
For 8D, what's the ordinance number?
1398.
1398.
Mr. Mayor, reading the ordinance, Item 8D, adopt ordinance number 13898, amending the San Carlos Municipal Code, adding section 6.04.310A, keeping of domestic fowl and rabbits.
Thank you. We had a break.
Chicken ordinance.
We don't have
No
to vote on
roosters.
that again? Christine, we don't have to vote on that again? That's just
No.
as amended? Okay, we just read that. Okay. We have item 9, reports to council, but staff, I don't see any reports to council listed.
We have no additional reports.
Okay, very good.
Maybe we're going to tell people that we're not going to get to this till the end.
That's
Unless
good.
you want to take it now. It's not our normal practice, but maybe you want to do that. I don't know.
I think we should,
No?
I think we'll just put it after item 11, unless council wants to make a motion, of course. We do, so 8E, typically 8E will go at the end of our new business when we pull things from the consent calendar. Okay, with council? Okay. Thank you, Vice Mayor Grisilli. And then with that, we have item number 10A, unfinished business, and this is consideration of authorizing the mayor to sign the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Letter or the San Carlos Climate Protection Letter. And I have some speaker slips on this, but Brian, why don't you give us your report first?
All right, thank you, Mayor and members of council. Most of you will recall from our last meeting that we had a discussion of authorizing the mayor to sign one of two potential climate letters. One was the Form U.S. Mayor's Climate Letter. The other was a proposal from staff for a San Carlos Climate Letter. As we discussed last time, the council, as you'll see from your set of 5 alternatives, is under no obligation to sign either letter, or you may wish to take elements of one or both of them and modify them as you see fit. Our discussion last time turned around the pros and cons of the two letters. In the case of the U.S. Mayor's letter, you'll see in the staff report there's background on the origin of that particular document, and there is a copy attached. The items that staff highlighted for you in terms of our areas that we wanted to have you consider were in Section A of the proposed letter. The letter sets a specific target for greenhouse gas reduction. Staff would note that at the present time the state of California has not adopted such a standard, and indeed, given their current budget problems, is debating whether to do so for fear of triggering a city mandated cost. Staff would note that given the city's current general fund problems, it may be wise for the city to defer as well, so that if there is in fact mandated targets, the city may be able to recoup some of those costs later on into the general fund. The other area of discussion last time was the language surrounding Section C of the U.S. Mayor's letter. It outlines a number of specific tasks, and there was some discussion about whether or not those were tasks that the city might decide to undertake later on. As the council knows from the agenda, we also have on tonight's agenda approval of the Climate Action Plan proposal from the Planning Department. And as you know from that particular item, the City of San Carlos late last year received a $75,000 grant from the Bay Area Air Quality Board for our innovative approach to climate action plans. The significant difference between our approach and the approach that other cities have taken is that we are proposing to link that particular plan to the city's upcoming general plan, so that the document or the items are both tied to our land use practices and are also enforceable. And in that discussion, when we do undertake a climate action plan, some of the items listed under Section C of the U.S. Mayor's letter will be considered, but obviously through that process it'll be up to the council ultimately to decide which of those you may or may not wish to undertake. In contrast, the alternate San Carlos climate letter as developed by staff basically highlights actions the city has already either taken and accomplished or items that are currently approved by the council for the city to undertake. It is the staff's feeling that if the city wishes to sign a climate letter but does not necessarily want to both make the commitment in advance of the action plan and agree to the various items listed under the mayor's letter, that the alternative letter does list a number of actions the city has already taken or will take and makes a strong statement by the community, but at the same time leaves until the action plan process the discussion about the items we have yet to review. So from the staff perspective, that is what we see as the differences between the two scenarios. I think last time there were excellent points made by the council on both letters. There was also some discussion by the council about modifying one or both of the letters, and we think that that's an option that you can take as well. If you look under the alternate section, we've expanded that a bit from last time, indicating that you can adopt the U.S. Mayor's letter, the San Carlos letter. You can make modifications to either or both. You can take no action, or you can come up with another direction to staff. So we think you have a number of choices in this area, and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Council, any questions that we hadn't asked at our last meeting for Mr. Mora?
I have one. I just want to make sure I read this part clear, and you seem to have hit on it in your report, the oral report you just made, that if we are to take such an action as to sign either letter, then in essence, what could happen if the state enacts AB 32 and then puts mandates on the city to do certain things according to the Kyoto letter, in agreement with the letter, that having agreed to the letter and put certain things in action that in such a way that if mandates come down and then we went back to the state and said, well, we want to be paid for that mandate, the state could turn around and say, sorry, you already have a program that agrees with this, we're not paying you a dime.
We think that the U.S. Mayor's letter has that issue in Section A. As we indicated, Section A and C are the ones that we would highlight for you. And the state at this point is running behind schedule on their implementation of AB 32. At this time, it does not directly apply to cities. However, in our discussions with the Office of Planning and Research of the governor's staff, they've indicated that it is their belief that to meet the statewide targets, they will need to issue some items for cities and counties to respond to. They have not yet issued either the rules to calculate the 1990 levels, which is part of what the mayor's letter talks about. They also have not issued the rules for cities. In our meeting with them in April, they've talked about things such as guidelines, goals, sort of all sorts of words other than mandate, because they recognize that for the state to issue flat mandates on the city, they may indeed be liable for costs, as Councilmember Grocott indicates.
Excuse me, Mr. Moore, but are you saying that in AB 32, they referenced the Kyoto letter?
In AB 32,
Who signed it?
they have standards similar to the Kyoto.
That's not what my question is. My question is specific to Councilmember Grocott's point, is if we sign this letter that in AB 32, they make a specific reference to those cities that have signed this letter. Is that's not correlated in AB 32?
No, AB 32 has goals that are specific, similar to this. At the moment, we are not covered because we do not have a city utility. However, the state has indicated they do plan to issue some rules for cities. Whether or not it's a mandate is not clear.
I understand, but it's separate from this letter. AB 32 is separate.
That's correct.
It's not a correlated issue.
I'm hearing two different things, because what I heard you say is if we look at the letter for the, as written in Kyoto, the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement, you're saying items A and C, which is pretty much the whole letter. I mean, that's the meat of the letter. That those, agreeing to those items, A and C, could come back to bite us later, because we if the state mandates certain things and we go back to the state and say, well, we need money for that, they could say, you signed this Kyoto letter, you were in agreement with it, it has these things in there. Again, we're not going to pay you anything because you've already said you're willing to go along with this and take on these costs and be a part of this, so we don't have to pay anything.
Maybe let me restate that. There are two different sections and two different issues. In the area of Section A, there is a specific target for reduction mentioned. It is similar to, but not necessarily exactly the same as AB 32, and I think Councilmember Grocott's point is correct. The staff is highlighting for the council the fact that if you make a specific commitment to a target now, your argument for getting reimbursement on a mandate later is significantly weakened. And we have talked to small cities such as ours that have elected not to sign a letter for that very reason. In the question of Section C, it outlines a series of particular steps that the city might take. What I heard the council say last time about Section C is that there was some thought about maybe rewording that a little bit to make it clear that while those are things the council might be willing to look at, that you weren't necessarily agreeing to do all those things right now. Paraphrasing perhaps, but that was my take on the discussion last time.
And then regarding the letter that was rewritten to be just a San Carlos letter.
Correct.
Speak to that regarding mandates.
The letter that we have rewritten talks about things that the city has already accomplished or that the city is planning to do, including things such as develop a climate action plan. It does not include specific targets, and the reason for that, again, is to try to buy some time and wait and see what the state is going to do, whether or not they are going to mandate specific reduction targets. So it is very specific to things San Carlos has done. I think the other key thing here as well is what we tried to do in the alternate letter is craft something specific to San Carlos. The practice in the city, generally speaking, is we generally don't tend to adopt other folks' letters. We tend to craft things that relate to the city proper, and that's what we tried to do here.
And is there a reason that we, in our letter, that we need to make any reference to climate protection or global warming? For instance, in item A, we could say, we urge the federal government and state governments to work to reduce pollution levels, including efforts to reduce dependence on fossil fuels, accelerate the development of clean, economical energy resources and fuel-efficient technologies, so on and so forth.
I think we can, if we want to wordsmith and fashion, we can fashion. I think we have every option.
Correct. That's correct. You can leave that in and take that out as the council sees fit, yes.
Okay. Any other questions? I have some public comment slips on this. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, just before we get to public comment, I want to clarify, I'm one council member that was actually absent at our last meeting, and just wanted to assure, though, the people who are speaking, I did have a chance to review the videotape of the broadcast 2 weeks ago. You guys look great on TV. And, of course, I did look at the entire package, not only from our last meeting, this evening's meeting. There's been a few emails I received, so when you do speak, do make sure you know that all of us are familiar and up to speed with what has occurred. But, of course, everybody else would be interested in hearing any other thoughts you have on this item. So, thank you.
Okay, so our first public comment speaker is Katie Scrable. And will be followed by Margaret Desmond and then Julie Willard.
Well, thank you for my second time up here. I feel very privileged. And as I mentioned, my name is Kate Scrable, and I'm a citizen here from San Carlos for the past 5 years. And I do harbor no illusion that my comments here will be taken with any serious regard, but I wanted to voice my opinion not only on behalf of myself, but on behalf of 23 other citizens and mothers of the San Carlos Mothers Group who have children who are bringing up families in the city of San Carlos. So regardless of whether you discount the experts or insurmountable evidence or not, the threat of global warming, to be very clear, is real and threatens our planet for generations to come. In 2007, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is a UN-appointed panel of the top scientists in the world, issued the following key conclusions. The warming of the planet is unequivocal. The increase in the global temperature is very likely due to the increase in human greenhouse gases. Excuse me. And global warming and sea levels will continue to rise. As elected servants to this city, I strongly encourage you to cast aside your own personal beliefs, your own personal religion, and your own personal ideologies and do what is right and sign the Mayor's Global Climate Agreement. Just this last year, San Carlos was nominated the third greenest city in America, based on thousands of people in this city who actually put us on the map. And I would be just very sad to see you discount the voice of the people who elected you into office. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Margaret Desmond.
Good evening, Mayor Lewis and City Council members. I'm Margaret Desmond. I'm a resident of San Carlos and a member of San Carlos Green, although I'm speaking for myself, not for the group. But I do want to express my support for the U.S. Mayor's climate protection letter. And I have one point that I'd like to make, because there are several differences, as has been discussed, between the two letters, the Mayor's letter and the letter that has been written by the San Carlos staff. But the one difference that I would like to talk about is the absence of any reference to trees in the San Carlos staff's letter. That is an item, it is item 11, C.11 in the U.S. Mayor's letter, and it reads, I'll quote it, that one of the things that the city will try to do is to maintain healthy urban forests, promote tree planting to increase shading, and to absorb CO2. No mention of trees in the city staff letter. And I suppose it could be rationalized by saying, as was told to us by Brian Moore, that they have only put down those things that the cities have started, and maybe they don't feel that they've started anything. So that's why it's absent. But I really want to push my point and saying eliminating that item from our letter sends a message that San Carlos is not concerned about the benefits of trees. Benefits such as reducing CO2 by pulling the carbon from the air and storing it in the tree's leaves, thus reducing the impact of global warming. Trees also protect the wildlife in our town, providing habitat for the many birds that we are fortunate come and visit us. Trees also benefit residential areas by providing shade over our streets and reducing the temperature. Research indicates that traffic slows down when passing through tree-lined streets, a safety for our children. Careful observation of San Carlos reveals that many of our residential streets need trees. Areas in some of our parks could benefit from trees, and some of our more busy streets would also benefit from trees. Our sister cities to the north and the south of us, Belmont and Redwood City, have both demonstrated their dedication to increasing the tree canopy in their towns and have both received Tree City USA awards. Plaques showing these awards can be seen on El Camino in their respective towns.
I'm sorry, Ms. Desmond.
None in San Carlos. Am I finished?
Yes.
Okay.
If you
well,
can conclude quickly.
Yeah, I'm just saying, one of the points I want, they're both in Tree City. One of the things I wanted to say is that we can afford a tree planting effort. I've spent much time with Redwood City, and I know how they operate, and they work closely with the city. They are all the workers are city volunteers, and they receive funding from their businesses, and we can do it too.
Thank you very much. Julie Willard will be followed by Pat Bell.
Good evening, members of the council, Mayor Lewis. I'm Julie Willard. I'm speaking on behalf of San Carlos Green. I want to thank you for your attention to climate action once again. And I'd first like to address a statement made at the last council meeting and also a statement that was made here tonight that's disputing the evidence for global climate change. The National Science Academies of every industrial nation have unanimously stated that human-caused global warming is an urgent problem. The editor-in-chief of Science magazine said that, and I quote, "A consensus as strong as the one that has developed around this topic is rare in science," unquote. And the world's most comprehensive assessment, the IPCC, which Kate also mentioned, in this report, written by over 4,000 world experts, warns of grave consequences with 90% certainty. Even CEOs of Alcoa, DuPont, GE, and Walmart, just to name a few, not only agree, but also believe action will help the economy. Thus, I strongly encourage you to sign the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement in its original form. There are economic benefits for taking climate action now. Clean tech is one of the few areas where businesses are hiring, even in the economic downturn. And many of the steps we need to take for energy and water efficiency will save the city and residents real money. As one example, in Palo Alto, installing compact fluorescent light bulbs in city-owned buildings saved the city over $117,000 each year. And I have a document from Cool Cities that has lots and lots of suggestions for how local governments can use smart energy solutions to save themselves money. On the topic of economics, there were two articles that appeared this weekend in the San Mateo Times and the Mercury News about how San Carlos could improve its climate action efforts. In one of the articles, a San Carlos city official is quoted as saying that other cities are spending $200,000 to $1 million on climate initiatives. And I want to make clear that this statement is incorrect. There is no city on the peninsula who is spending near this much money, especially when you're talking about cities that are the same size as San Carlos. So the truth is that with strong positive leadership, San Carlos can use its climate initiatives not only for economic gain, but also for the health and well-being of its residents and the environment. Lastly, on behalf of San Carlos Green, I would like to again strongly advocate that the city include broad community support in the Climate Action Plan, and I would also encourage the city to take early actions now to implement a green building checklist requirement similar to the program that San Mateo County has already passed. And once again, I really thank you for your time and attention to this climate action effort in San Carlos.
Thank you very much. Pat Bell.
I too support the mayor's letter, the official one, not the San Carlos one. Brian said tonight that the state is avoiding using the word mandate. So why is there all this discussion about losing out if on money if they're not going to say mandate anyway because they know it would cost them money? So I think that's a moot point. And I think saying that we can't afford it is not an excuse. Money's tight for everyone. Gas prices are going up, food prices are going up. I dare say that everybody up there makes more than I do every year. And this is something that we just have to do. We have to do it because the time is running short. We haven't stopped composting. We haven't stopped doing all the things that we do because money is short. We're cutting other places because this is important to us. And I think San Carlos needs to sign the mayor's letter to say this is important to us. It doesn't say we have to do this, that, and the other thing by such and such a date. It says we believe in this and we're going to move in the right direction. And what on earth good is it to sign a letter that says we're going to do what we already did? I mean, that's pablum. I think we have to stand up and say we are going to move in the right direction. We believe in making our planet cleaner and better. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we have, if there's nobody else, anybody else in the public like to address this item? All right, council, discussion. We did, just for the benefit of the public, I think it's pretty well vetted here, but we did consider this at our last meeting. We had lots of discussion on it. We kind of ended up in a little bit of a lack of a quorum to move in a particular direction. So pressure's on Royce. No, I'm just kidding. We're gonna just talk about it again tonight, but we have had a chance to sort of talk about our point of views on this.
I'll throw out some general comments, Mr. Mayor, that I'm in favor of signing the mayor's letter for climate change. I view the alternative letter as something near useless. It's roughly equivalent to what I did on January 1st and made a New Year's resolution to lose weight. Yeah, okay, yeah, that didn't happen. I also understand that there's a push to say we should wait for an audit, but that we're going to wait for a plan to come back and tell us what is our audit, what is our budget, what have we got here, what is our carbon footprint, what do we need to do. Frankly, I just look at my waistline and go, I should lose weight. And I think in terms of the city, in terms of what we're doing for greenhouse gas emissions, pollution, what else can we do to save money and become more efficient, I don't need an audit. We can start to move on these things now. And I think from an economic standpoint, it's better for us. If we're able to reduce, and if the state comes up with a mandate, and if they demand us to do something, and if all these things come into play, and we've already made progress, then the opportunity for us to potentially say, hey guys, we're already leading this charge. I prefer that. I understand people have different interpretations of data. I want to defend my colleague, Mr. Grocott, for one moment, that while we have a very different interpretation of the data, he said he was willing to say pollution has a problem. So it strikes me that if I had changed the word global warming to man-made pollution causing really bad stuff, he may support it. In which case, I don't care if you want to call it flying baby ducks. I mean, we've got a challenge here. I believe that our existence on the planet and our activities on the planet are making changes. I've spent enough time in Africa measuring snowfall on Kilimanjaro and tell you there ain't much left. Give it 3 years, it won't be there. I've gone to the Caucasus Range, and you can take a look where the glaciers have receded. It's wonderfully green pasture. I've been to Aconcagua, and I know that the mayor has been there too, and we can tell you where the couloirs are. This winter I'll be in Antarctica, pretty close to the South Pole, but not quite. I'll tell you what the weather is going on in Antarctica. It's changing. And I will sit here completely convinced through my study, through working with scientists, through a number of years at Discovery Channel. You might say we were doing pop science, but I supported the guys out in the field. I look at the data and I have no question in believing that humans have an effect on the planet. We've done it with pollution, so if you want to call it pollution, I'll call it pollution. I don't care. The mayor's letter strikes me as the right thing to do, and after discussion, I will make a motion to approve that letter.
Other discussion? Councilman Grocott?
Throw back some stuff. I watched a documentary on Kilimanjaro, by the way. I've never traveled there. I don't have the financial wherewithal to globetrot around the world. But in the documentary that I watched on Discovery Channel, they mentioned global warming, and they said, similar to what this woman who got up and spoke said, maybe likely that it's, man-made causation, not definite. It's a theory. Other theories with Kilimanjaro and other points of warming around the globe are volcanic activity, things that are happening underneath, in that case of the mountain. It's not a given that it has to do with climate. And climate change, to the extent that it may or may not be occurring, the causation factor being man-made is completely a theory. Now, I'll tell you about a conversation I had with the city manager. I called Mark and asked, why in this staff report is there no recommendation one way or the other based normally, as our staff reports are, on sort of the facts, if you will. They give us, for instance, on budget, here's the numbers, here's the facts, here's where things are going or may be going, or if they make a recommendation on a retirement package, or if they make any kind of recommendation, they vet the issue, they give us the pros and the cons, and then they say, here's our recommendation, you can do this, or you can do A, B, or C, or you can do nothing at all. Why doesn't that exist here? Well, it's because, I'll throw in another thing. I sent him to a website that, I brought a book tonight. This is The Skeptical Environmentalist. I've been reading this book. There are other views out there. It's not just one. And I sent Mr. Weiss to some websites that are skeptical of global warming, and especially, again, the causation being man-made. And he went and looked at some of them, which I appreciated, and we, threw some emails back and forth. But to get to the point, staff didn't make a recommendation like that because we don't have scientists on staff to make such recommendations. We don't have that kind of wherewithal, which partly points to this is an issue we shouldn't even be dealing with. We're not the state government, or definitely not the federal government, who have staff members who can get involved in this and research it, or we don't have the wherewithal to hire experts to look over the issue. It's getting into an area where, we don't make those kind of policy decisions because we don't have the staff to do it. So we shouldn't even be treading into these waters. It's fine for us to tread into the waters which we have tread into, which reflect the things we have done, because we have the staff to do it, and staff can look at these items like, let's put solar panels on our courtyard and we can save this much money and produce this much electricity, or let's recycle plastic bottles because we can save so much money on our landfill, or so much of our landfill, and so much money, therefore, with our landfill. All those things make sense to do, because our staff have the wherewithal to look at those issues. But to take on this issue, no, we don't have that kind of staff expertise or the time to send one of our staff members out there to become that kind of expert. We shouldn't even be treading in these waters. Now, if we do tread in these waters, somebody said, not if, but when. I disagree. These kind of things, these kind of issues get pushed and pushed and pushed until over the edge you go. I already see it in our staff report that we have before us with the issue of our general plan. We're being made to spend money on climate change because of things coming down from the state. There is a state law that says now, because Jerry Brown sued one of the cities that developed a city plan without a climate action plan. And he decided, I'm going to sue that city and see to it that they put that in their general plan, and now that's what we have to do. And we have to spend, sure, it's grant money, but we've got to spend whatever amount, I think it's $75,000 that's recommended in here, to include climate change in our general plan. It's not if it's coming, it's here. It is coming. And these mandates will come down, and if we sign this letter, we will not be able to get reimbursed for those mandates. And so we could potentially be making a decision tonight that could hurt us later financially. We're not in a position to take on that kind of hurt financially. We need to really consider what we're doing. My argument is, let's continue to do the right sort of things as we are doing as a city with all kinds of programs to be green and to pay attention to the environment. My argument is that quality of life, it makes sense to address pollution and wastefulness. We shouldn't be wasteful. I have no problem with being economic, using our resources well, and not polluting where we don't have to pollute. But to do it under the guise of the sky is falling, climate change, global warming, etc., I don't agree with. Now, someone said, we have the money to do it. Well, perhaps we don't. City of San Jose actually is looking at cutting back on all their environmental programs because their Police Officers Association is saying, we need more in terms of our pay and benefit and more police officers. And the city's looking at priorities, and they're saying, well, we're going to have to cut some of these environmental programs to pay our public safety officers. Are we any different? I don't think we are. So I think we should pass on this letter, both letters, and we can spend our money and our resources in a far better way. And at the same time, we can continue to do the things that are right to do. I'm not arguing whether some things are right to do in terms of quality of life, in terms of pollution, in terms of recycling, etc. I'm all for it. Just not under this guise. Thank you.
Councilor Royce?
Well, let me weave my trip into this discussion. I was in a place in the world about 23 hours away by flight in which a lot of the resorts recycle everything. There's fluorescent bulbs everywhere. There was a place in a park where we were walking, and there was probably a piece of litter, plastic the size of my fingernail, and the person picked it up and put it in their backpack to throw away later. And yet it was within a country in which coal burning is a source of making their electricity, and there are in most of the country 2-hour rotating brownouts or blackouts totally power off 2 hours per day. And so when you think about what's going on in San Carlos, it also helps to think about what's going on in the world. This is a worldly problem, and I truly have a conviction and understanding that this is truly a serious problem with greenhouse gases and the effect of our climate change in the world. In how we address this, though, I'm not sure. In listening to the tapes and reading the documentations, I kind of see a couple viewpoints. One is a viewpoint of that the purpose of the letter is to really commit definite action on things that we in San Carlos need to do. I think the second goal that I hear from a different group of people is what can we do to show our support, our enthusiasm on what we need to do in this area. And while I am one that is truly, again, passionate and wants and knows that this is an issue and we need to be aggressive with it, and not only we can be proud of what we've done, but we're only part of the way there. We need to do a heck of a lot more in all of our efforts to reduce greenhouse gases in San Carlos, in the state of California, in the U.S., and within the world. My major concern is writing a letter that promises specific action where we're actually writing and committing, we're verbally or writing down commitments that we're going to be doing in future years, when I'm used to, in my business, you make business decisions at the time. You do planning at a particular time, but you remain flexible. You remain agile. You remain in a situation where the best decisions on what to do come from what you analyze as the current situation and the most current amount of data that you have going. So I'll use an example. We, in the next 2 weeks, will be approving a budget. The budget is merely a plan. And I think that we would all appreciate the fact that we look at that plan, but 3 months from now, 4 months from now, it's merely a plan. There needs to be the flexibility in business to look at situation 3 months from now, look at our revenues, look at our expenses, look at some surprises we have, and make adjustments. And if I related to this letter, the formal letter commits us to do certain things that we're committing, we're putting out on the table, and I think Council Member Vice Mayor Griselli mentioned it, his concern, which is also my concern. We put a letter out, and 6 months later, 9 months later, people come back to us and say, wait a second, you promised. Well, I will never promise anything because I'm going to make the decision now. A decision I make next week may be different because something changed. There may be more relevant data. Technology changed. I've done it a lot in business where technology roadmap changes, and it changes your whole plan. And so I also think in this whole area, we really need, well, let me summarize here. We have a mandate with Assembly Bill 32 to do some really important things here in the city of San Carlos. I think our city of San Carlos will do the right things. I think when we understand what our baselines are, I would like to see us do 5 times the efforts in certain areas and much less in other areas, because we are the ones that know best our city. We know where the best payback is. We know what we could accomplish and what we could get aggressive with and do those things. But to act on what I would call a generic letter that covers things on a U.S.-wide basis, some of those may apply, some of those may not to our city. And so I just generally ask why there is a letter. Why would we ever commit to something to basically promise future action? I would like to reserve the ability to proceed to actually perform much better with action is much more important than words and words in speech or written on a letter. I want to prove in actions that we will be aggressive in this area, but I'm concerned about committing to a letter until we have all the facts, and we need to basically move through that like we move with other business decisions, make the best decisions at the time. So with that, I know Brian's tried to do a letter which I think accomplishes showing our support as far as our city letter. It's very vague. Omar, I kind of agree with him. It doesn't have a lot of meat on the bones. It does show our support, but I would be in favor of even doing nothing, or if we do a letter, I do want to show our support verbally, but how we run our business will be the way that I just explained, I think is the best way to run our business.
Vice Mayor Griswold?
As I mentioned last time, as Councilmember Royce said also, it's a very difficult decision. In my opinion, I come down on the side of Councilmember Ahmad and Councilmember Royce and Mayor Lewis about the importance of this letter. I'm not saying that it's not important, but as I said last week and last time, and Mr. Royce sort of echoed it, I just can't personally. I can't promise anything unless I know I'm going to do it. That doesn't mean that, as Councilmember Royce said, that in 3 months something comes down and we say, okay, now we're in a different situation and we can do X, Y, and Z add on to it. I know there's a tenor of thought that if you don't think big, you'll never get anywhere. And if you don't say it, it'll never happen. And if you don't dream it, it'll never happen. And I appreciate that, but the reality of our situation at the moment is that we have to prioritize. And I think what we're trying to do is prioritize as best we can for San Carlos. It can certainly be argued that there should be a higher priority on this. That's certainly a train of thought. I think we're trying to address the issue as best we can with our situation the way we are, as Councilmember Royce said, today. And I don't want to beat the dead horse because I said it last time. I'm certainly willing to, if we need to adjust a little bit, the San Carlos letter, so to speak. But I believe that staff is on the right track of showing that we support what this Kyoto Agreement and letter says, but yet we have to make sure that it fits to what we have. So those are my comments. Again, reiterating, as I said 2 weeks ago, my thoughts haven't changed from then.
All right. And obviously, despite what the letter says, in our case, it's a council's letter, not a mayor's letter. I mean, the mayor signs it as a matter of protocol. This is the wishes of council. I mean, I want to make sure we all stay focused. One of the great things that comes clear in this for me when I read it, and I said, I'll try to be as brief as possible because I had some of these comments last time, is that San Carlos has a lot to be proud of. When you read through the items, the 12 items there, I believe we're making headway in every one of those items. It's because we're making headway in every one of those items that I'm comfortable with the Kyoto letter. I think Vice Mayor Grisilli, I think there is, value in having a goal and promising to make effort toward that goal. And I think I read this differently than you all read it. I think this is a promise of effort to strive in these program areas, which we are already doing. And I think there's flexibility within that because it's such as these programs. And in fact, the thing I really like about the changes that staff made to the second letter is I like the wording that says we will continue to work on programs that strive to reduce global warming pollution. This may include such programs as. I mean, I think that's a real positive revision in that letter. So, I'm proud of our progress. There is, and to be clear, there is no language in AB 32 that ties the signing of this letter to reimbursement for any programs that the state may or may not mandate in the future, period. There's no language in AB 32 that references this. It's an opinion. I share a different opinion than others. To urge the state and federal government to enact policies that start to reverse the global warming trend, I think it's important. Is it symbolic? Yes. Does it speak for our community? Yes. And I happen to think that that's what the community wants to say. So again, this is a council decision. It's not a mayor's decision. There's two of us that are comfortable with the Kyoto letter. That's not enough to push that one forward. So from what, in reading the council, it seems like there may be quorum to sign the alternate letter, which is San Carlos Climate Protection Letter. And maybe we want to discuss, I know Ms. Desmond encouraged before number 11 from the previous one, whether or not we may want to try to include an item from the urban tree canopy. I would be curious to ask staff in transitioning over here to now maybe the council starting to think about whether or not we want to do this alternate letter. Staff, why was number 11 from the Kyoto letter taken out of the San Carlos letter?
I hear what Ms. Desmond said, and I think we probably were looking at it two different ways. I think from the staff perspective, we were concerned in the original letter that it talked about tree planting because, as the council probably knows, that was a budget cut you made 3 years ago in the general fund. So the city has stopped that. However, what Ms. Desmond is referring to, I believe, is her proposal to work with residents to plant trees on private property. And I certainly don't see any problem with that as long as it's clear that it's a voluntary program. It's not city funded. So I think there is an opportunity to put something there in there. Yes.
I mean, if staff is comfortable, again, what we're saying is this may include some of these programs such as these. Mm-hmm. So if these are programs that could be included in that, then again, neither letter is making a promise. It's making a promise to lead in effort. And that's the only thing I'm sad about in coming off the Kyoto.
Mr. Mayor? Got a suggestion. We're going to discuss item 8E, which talks about the climate action plan with regard to our general plan. As I understand it, that will be an element of the general plan that does commit us to specific action, that does have a plan, that does have an outline, and that will probably have a corresponding budget. So I would actually be in favor of saying table this until such point in time that the climate action plan is completed with public input. And I'd be happy with that.
Well,
I mean, at that point, then you've got the public who has had a chance to weigh in. You've had a real study. Theoretically, we would have some sort of an audit that could come back. And if the other councilmen who are looking specifically at numbers and where the budget will hit, I have no problem to say let's have those numbers.
Yep. With all due respect to that, in my opinion, there's opportunity to potentially move on something tonight, and I don't see how one wouldn't hurt the other. And this is a positive statement of intent on the part of the city government. And so anyway, I wouldn't preclude this in order to do that. I think we need to do both.
It's an idea.
Mr. Mayor, through the chair, you admitted yourself that this is symbolic. So my question is, why are, as I made in my statement, we're going into waters that I don't believe we should be in for the reasons I stated regarding our staff expertise. Citizens come to us all the time. Not all the time, but I mean, this isn't the first time people have come to us to ask us to sign on to some kind of resolution of national or state interest that really has nothing to do with us as a city and the policies. You know, we're elected to be the board of directors, if you will, of this city government for the things that happen in this city and how the city operates and so forth. We're not asked to weigh in on, the Iraq War or, food for children throughout the world or any of those kind of things. People come to us once in a while and say, hey, would you sign on to this resolution because we're trying to push the federal government to do this or the state government to do that or whatever. And we're always reluctant to do that because that's not what we're, this body is not elected to give opinions to other elected officials or officials at other levels of government. That's not what we're elected to do. So why are we doing it now?
I appreciate your opinion. I think there may be some other opinions on the council.
Well, it's open for discussion. I'm asking the question.
I understand.
Well, maybe, and again, I was trying to find the middle ground here. I can't support the Kyoto part of it today, and I think, and I'm not speaking for Councilmember Royce, But if we can pass something tonight that shows that we are trying to do this, okay, I would be more than happy to schedule out, and again, we don't know when the state's coming down or when our audit is going to be there, but I would, whether it's this letter, if I read this right, this started a while ago. I don't know what the exact date was. It's dated on 2005. It's over 3 years ago.
Here in Seattle.
And it's gotten to us today, okay, for whatever reason. Perhaps we can have a situation where we literally will make a point to come back to it. In other words, we make a statement tonight, or whatever, if we can come to an agreement on the letter, but with that understanding that we will speak to this letter again when we get more information from the state of California or from some other things on AB 32 or whatever it is, and not just forget about it completely, but literally come back to it. I mean, I'm more than willing to do that. It's just difficult for me to.
I understand, but staff, you've drafted this letter saying that you feel like this is a letter that staff is comfortable with, that will not, in your opinion, compromise us with any sort of state or federal mandate.
I think that's exactly correct.
So my only thing is, why would we put it off? We have it, if we're willing to make the statement.
But we don't, Mr. Mayor, we don't know what the state's going to be doing yet. The state might come down with things that are irrelevant or don't even affect this, and we can say, well, we can do this now. Or am I speaking out of turn because we're thinking it's going to be exactly the opposite?
Well, I guess my point on the mandate question, which I hear the council grappling with, is the alternate letter does not include a mandate of any type. And we did that very much on purpose because we were trying to skip over that controversy. We have talked to other cities that don't want to sign a letter to avoid that. My thought was we need to come up with something. So if the council wishes to sign a climate letter and make a statement, you can make a statement, talk about the things that you either have completed or are underway right now, and also skip over that. So I think if you do head towards the alternate letter, I think you can do all of the above.
Council, if there's any motion or any other comments?
Yeah, I could speak up too. Yeah, I'd be comfortable with the San Carlos letter just to get on record. But I think it's really important, I think, in our next strategic planning, which is coming up in 3 to 4 months, to work with Sierra Club San Carlos Green. And I'd like to see 2 or 3 specific objectives with owners, performance measures on things that we are going to do in this area. And that makes it formal. That makes it part of our business plan on what we're going to do and what we're measured against. I think the letter to show support would be fine.
Would you like to make a motion?
Sure. So I would like to make a motion that we adopt a mayor/city council letter that's listed in our package called the City of San Carlos Climate Protection Letter, listing 8 items. Do we want to add a 9th one about trees, as Margaret has described to that in the proposal, if I could? So I would like to amend it to add an item 9 that talks about maintaining healthy urban forests, promotes tree planting in the private sector to increase shading and absorb CO2.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second, Mr. Mayor. Second, Mr. Mayor.
Any further discussion?
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Lewis?
Yes. And with that, we will move on to item 11B, which is a change in the order of the agenda. And this is consideration of adopting a resolution of intention to amend the City of San Carlos PERS Safety Retirement Contract to provide 3 at 55 full formula for local safety members. Entering membership.
Mr. Mayor, in August 2001, the city and the Police Officers Association entered into an MOU on salary and benefits that at that time agreed to a retirement change to go to 3% at 50 effective January 1, 2006 for the PERS retirement benefit. That clause was continued in the August 2006 MOU that has run for the last 2 years and expires July 31st of this year, 2008. The change itself actually went into effect January 1, 2006, so that current members of the police department are receiving a retirement benefit that the city's cost is 3% at 50. It's based on that formula, 3% at 50. There was a clause in the original MOU and continued in the August 2006 extension that allowed the city, if the cost exceeded 20% of salary for members of the police department, for the city to go back to PERS and change the contract with the public employees retirement system so that the benefit would revert back to 3% at 55 for new members entering the department as of the effective date of that change. The staff report before you has indicated that the cost to the city, starting almost, I guess, at the beginning in January 2006, has well exceeded the 20%. It's almost double. It started at 35%. It's increased to 36% at the current time, and next year would be even 37%. So that if the city council was to amend the PERS agreement, as I understand, the cost would, for new members of the department, the cost would be reduced to something like 16% of pay, which would be about a 50% savings. The city has, of course, this year been in extensive discussion both at the staff and the council level as to the budget and finance problems of the city. A change such as is proposed to you by staff at this time would not make an immediate impact. It's a future impact. But then again, the budget problems for the city are stretched out to the future, and there's a significant savings that the city would have over a period of time as members of the department rotated eventually out. The timing on this is such that the current MOU expires July 31, 2008. If we're going to make the change, we have to begin the process at this time, so it would be effective, as shown in the staff report, by the end of July of this year. The process that you have to take is first adopting a resolution of intention to do this, and the language is in the resolution of intention in your staff report. And then there's an ordinance that has to be adopted to amend the PERS contract. You have to introduce that ordinance, wait 20 days, and at a subsequent meeting then adopt that ordinance, and it would take effect 30 days from that date. So for all of that to take place by July 31st, the time to start the action for this process is at the present time. I'll be glad to answer any questions. I'm sure there are a number of speakers on the matter, and staff is prepared to respond.
Thank you very much. Council, you have questions for Mr. Lanzone?
I do, just real quickly. Excuse me. These changes do not affect current employees, correct?
Not at all. That's correct.
So current employees are grandfathered.
The new members that just entered the department, in the last couple of weeks are in at 3% at 50, and they would stay at 3% at 50 as long as they stay with the city of San Carlos. It's only someone coming in after July 23rd of this year who would then have a retirement benefit of 3% at 55 as opposed to 50.
Okay. Thank you.
Bob, can I ask a question? And this may have to go to Greg. So how many in our past 5 years, what's our experience? How many officers do retire at 50 versus ones that work beyond 55, 60, 65? What kind of numbers is it?
I'd have to defer to the chief
And
on that.
and you may not know that as an actual fact, but just general feel is, do officers retire at 50?
I've been with the department now for a little over 3 years, and I really can't recall any officer that retired at the age of 55 or older. They're retiring somewhere between 50 and 55.
50, so in that young group.
I don't recall.
Okay.
I don't believe there's anybody that retired at 55 or older.
Yeah, okay. Because why I ask, I'm part of a JPA, part of my duty council to sit on another board which has a San Mateo County organization, about 120 people. and they had currently financial statements showed 27% of their employee base, they retirement at 50. However, their experience, because I asked the same question, was that generally many people work 60, 65 years old in that nature of the business. So the factor of retiring at a point at that time was not great in that organization, but in yours it sounds like it could be.
It is.
Okay, thank you.
I have some public speaker slips here. Suzanne Shepard will be followed by Gil Granado.
Good evening, City Council. I'd like to first welcome all the POA members sitting in the back. We have a good turnout today. First off, my name is Suzanne Shepard, and I've been employed with the City of San Carlos as a police officer since January of 2006. Today, I come to the City Council to express my voice against the adoption of the 3% at 55 retirement formula. A little background on your department. As of May 27, 2008, the City of San Carlos has 32 authorized positions. The chiefs, commanders, sergeants, and officers fill only 30 of those positions, even with the additions today. The City of San Carlos does not have a dispatch center. This was merged with the City of Menlo Park approximately 2 years ago in order to save police officer positions. The City of San Carlos does not have a traffic unit, does not have a narcotics unit, does not have a gang unit. These are all specialized units that the police department has had to give up due to budget shortfalls. As of May 27, 2008, our police department has only 15 officers available to work a patrol shift at any time. This does not take into account vacations, training, or sick calls. It is consistent that officers are working a 12-hour overtime shift at least 1 to 3 days during their days off. In the year 2008, I myself have already worked 125 hours of overtime. I know of several other officers who have at least double that amount. This is the staffing situation the police department has been faced with and endured quietly for the past 2 to 3 years. The average age of death for retired police officers is 66 years old. This job beats up on your body. This profession is complete with psychological stress, danger, rotating shifts, family disruption, and exposure to noxious materials. The American Cancer Society is going to add working the graveyard shift as a known and probable carcinogen to its list. An argument has been made that by adopting a 3% at 55 PERS formula will save the City of San Carlos $500,000 annually. Well, the San Carlos Police Department has already been saving the city money. By operating at critical minimum staffing levels, where has the money gone that was saved by not paying the 5 police officer positions that we can't staff? The city needs to be accountable for this money.
I'm going to have to ask you to conclude your comments, please.
Okay. With the adoption of a 3% at 55 retirement plan for new members, the city will effectively cut the department off at the knees for new police officers. As a new officer, why would you want to work 5 extra years at a police department that is already understaffed when you can go to a bigger department and work 5 years less? The city council needs to take a tough look at what's important in their city, and are they willing to make public safety their top priority? Thank you.
Thank you. Gil Granado, followed by Darrell Lindsay.
Good evening, Mayor, fellow City Council members. I am Gil Granado. I'm President of the San Carlos Police Officers Association. As you can see, as an organization, we have far gone flooding you with speaker cards, but we've asked for a few people to speak. And as a head of the affected organization, I would ask for a little bit of consideration. And I'm not going to talk about how we may be fully staffed, but in actuality we are not. The chief can speak to that. I am not going to talk about how this will affect our recruiting and our ability to maintain a staffing level. The city manager already spoke to that in the Daily Journal yesterday. What I am going to talk to you about is your police force, most of which are sitting here today in the back row. Because without these people, the department is just a bunch of policies, procedures, forms, and patrol cars, which have also been cut. These are the officers that serve the citizens of San Carlos. Being a police officer has a special meaning. Not just anyone can do this job, or most agencies in California wouldn't have vacancies they do. There was a time when an officer was hired based on how much space was filled up when they stood in the doorway, but these times are long gone. You cannot standardize our job, what we do, or who we are. We touch drug addicts with open sores, intoxicated people with urinated pants, homeless people with weeks of dirt and grime, and we wrestle with half-naked people that we later learn were tested positive for hepatitis C because we are police officers. We have the huge responsibility of making split-second decisions between life and death, which will be second-guessed the next morning because we are police officers. We all entered law enforcement for different reasons. One thing that never changes what we have inside is an intangible something that makes seemingly normal people race towards a man with a knife when everyone else is going the other way. It is that something that makes us unwavering as we clear the call of giving CPR to an infant and we respond to direct traffic in the rain in the middle of the night, knowing we still have 3 reports pending and we don't even have our coffee. It is holding out hope that this year you might be off on any given holiday and you won't miss so many of your family's events because we are police officers. In my opinion, law enforcement is one of the most demanding professions because we are dealing with the unknown, people. We are sent or happen upon situations where ordinary citizens couldn't solve their own problems or because someone was just victimized and we are the first persons they will contact. For this reason, we are called counselors. We convince people to do something they don't want to do, such as leave the house for the night, and we let them think it was their idea. For this reason, we are called problem solvers. We are often the first to arrive when a major accident takes place, so we administer first aid. For this reason, we are called first responders. We are the first to arrive in a traumatic accident or mishap that puts us in a situation to give CPR or jumpstart somebody's heart. For this reason, we are called lifesavers. We are the final stop for people that choose to disobey the law and norms of what a civilized society should be, and we are forced to take those people to jail. For this reason, we are called everything in the book. Because we are the person that will check your backyard at 3 a.m. in the morning because you heard a noise and saw someone. For this reason, we are called a sight for sore eyes. We are just like you and everyone else in here, except we risk our lives and our safety and the semblance of what most people would consider a normal life. For these reasons and many more that our time limit will not allow us to cover, we deserve more than what we get, but we will settle for the same retirement benefits our fellow brothers and sisters in law enforcement are getting because we are police officers. Why would anyone come here to San Carlos when they can become a police officer in any neighboring city and retire 5 years earlier with the same benefits? Should you decide to move forward and implement the second-tier retirement for all new officers, the results are predictable. We will slide backwards and erase everything our current chief has accomplished in regards to staffing. We will see officers that will come to San Carlos and spend a year or two getting trained at our cost of about $80,000 to $120,000, and then they will move on to where they can retire 5 years earlier. Worse yet, we will be forced to settle for officers that couldn't get hired somewhere else, and this is the reason for our concern. This could not only affect our safety, but also affects you when you make that phone call at 3 a.m. in the morning. In closing, I would challenge the City Council and the City Manager to truly evaluate the decision to implement the second-tier retirement system and recognize the true cost, not just the dollars and cents, but the lasting effects it will have on this department, the city, and the citizens of San Carlos. Show us the savings. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Daryl Lindsay, followed by Ed Estrada.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Daryl Lindsay. I was raised in San Carlos, and I've lived here about 15 years. I am not in favor of this proposal. I think our public safety needs to be of the highest priority. And as the adage goes, you get what you pay for, or in this case, what you don't pay for. There's no incentive for a lateral officer or recruit to come to San Carlos when they can go to any neighboring agency and get a better retirement benefit. The top police officer candidates will go elsewhere and will be faced with choosing from a pool of applicants of lesser quality and experience. Secondly, I fear these appointees will then go through the academy, FTO program, probationary period, put in a year, and then leave for that neighboring agency, all on the city's dime. Then we start all over again and do it again. Because of the cost of living is so high here, we need to work on retention and recruitment of our officers and stop the revolving door that San Carlos has been faced with police officers for many years. I realize we have some city financial problems, and I wanted to offer a solution. Almost all of our neighboring cities have parking meters downtown that they get a benefit from. We don't have that. We have people that come to San Carlos, mostly from outside of San Carlos, that spend upwards of $100 for dinner at places like town and pay nothing to park there. I don't think any of those people would have a problem with putting $1 on a parking meter for an hour. We have the pleasure of having many upscale businesses on the Laurel Street Strip, and if you've driven down there just about any time during the day up till about 9 o'clock at night, it's hard-pressed to find a parking space. I think this is a revenue that the city could benefit from. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ed Estrada, followed by Karen Gadati.
Good evening, Mayor Lewis, council members. My name is Ed Estrada. I joined the San Carlos Police Department December of 2007. I've been here 5 months. A little background of myself. I have been a police officer for 24 years, and during those 24 years, I have worked in 3 other agencies. I came to San Carlos, one of the biggest reasons because of Chief Rothas, who was my commander at an agency where I worked for previously, who I gained to have a lot of respect for. I think Chief Rothas has done a tremendous job of forming a quality police department. During the 5 months that I've been here, I've been very impressed with the police officers that I've worked for. I've been very impressed with the supervisors that I've worked for. I've noticed the citizens here seem to appreciate their police. I am very much against this proposal. I truly believe I am what's considered a lateral officer. For those of you who don't know what a lateral officer is, an officer who has previous years of experience, who moves on to another police department, makes a career change. I am very happy with the change I have made here. I plan to make San Carlos my last home. I'm here to tell you that if you do pass this proposal, you are not going to get any lateral officers to come over to work for San Carlos. Some of you were here during their swearing in. Chief Rothas, with his hard work, brought over 4 lateral officers. I'll go on real briefly. Officer Craig McCarty has almost 20 years of experience as a police officer. He has tremendous experience in traffic, probably one of the most experienced officers in this whole entire county. He brings Officer Ron Albertson, who has tremendous experience in juvenile. Okay, that's a problem that we obviously want to keep in tabs here. He brings over Officer, now promoted, Eric Stanley, who brings tremendous.
I'm just going to ask you to shortly conclude your comments, please.
Okay. If you folks pass this proposal, I'm telling you right now, you're not going to have the quality of the lateral police officers coming over. You're going to have young officers leaving, and you're basically going to have a department, a training ground. That's what you're basically going to have. So I urge you not to pass this proposal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Estrada. Karen Gadati.
Good evening. My name is Karen Guadati. I've been a resident of San Carlos for 18 years. My family and I have very much enjoyed many benefits of living in this city, from the youth center to hometown days to art and wine festivals, AYSO soccer, and many other things. But the thing we have benefited from the very most as residents of San Carlos is the safety of living in this city. And it's not because of trees or climate or anything else. It's because of the professional men and women who are here tonight and those who can't be here tonight because they're patrolling in this city. I'm going to forgo my comments about retention and recruitment because I think that's been stated already and that's pretty obvious. But if this proposal is to pass, this will no longer be the city of good living if we start suffering some of the consequences that other departments, other cities in this county have encountered in the way of gangs, narcotics, etc. That is not a problem in this city, and that's why it is so good to live here and why so many people want to live here. Just in concluding, I want to raise one question. about whether or not certain financial aspects have been considered. Looking up at the dais, no insult intended, but I know there are other people who've left the years of their 40s behind here in this room, as I have. And we all know that we become more injury prone the older we get. And what I am wondering is, has anybody factored in what it is going to cost this city in officers who become disabled, injured, after the age of 50? I don't jump fences and I don't chase bad guys, and I know what happens to the body. And I would ask you to consider that, because I think that is a cost that has not yet been considered. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And that's the last public comment speaker slip I have. If anybody else would like to approach the dais, now would be your time. Okay. And with that, council discussion. Who would like to start? Councilmember Ahmad? Councilmember Grocott? I don't mean to pick on anybody.
Well, you look at the guy and go, hey, well, what do you think? We do have a spectacular police force. We have had recruiting challenges in the police force for quite some time. I learned this through the campaign and through the ride-alongs, and how hard it is to hire good people, how hard it is to keep good people, what it takes to do lateral moves. I agree with the other speakers, and have said this before, that one of the key issues of the City of Good Living is the fact that it is a city of safe living. And our police force has done a spectacular job of, if you will, actually putting out an illusion that, we're safe, we're calm, and it must be so easy to do it. Because I think all the citizens kind of go, it's safe. How hard can it be? And I think everybody who has done a ride-along, and if there are citizens that haven't done it, I would encourage it. You'll see just how much work and how hard the work for our police force is. I think this is not an easy thing to discuss. We've got to look at other programs to help our police force and to help recruitment. Retirement benefits are expensive benefits. There was a question, I saw Alice Avey come into the room. Some months ago, we put out a question that said we had a first-time home buyer credit that was underutilized. And we asked, why isn't it being used for the police force? What's going on? That really hasn't been reported back to the council, but there is an opportunity for us to say, well, we can make it available to police recruits. If that takes council action, let's figure out how to do it. Is it worth it to say we want, as city council, to help you guys buy homes? I'd love to do that. Just also to put one more spin to say how important we thought the police force is. We spent a good 6 hours in the library fighting about different budget cuts, but the one thing we all tried to do from this side was try to add positions to the police force. I don't think you're going to find anybody here who's going to say, no, we don't want to have a strong force or anything else. So I'll leave those as sort of the general comments as we move forward.
Okay. Councilmember Grocott? Councilmember Royce?
I'll go next. I'll admit to being a board member on the fire board when we were putting that back together and negotiating things with the firefighters union. This is one of the things we put on the table, and we did it because we needed to save cost, cut cost, and I hear the arguments about recruiting and so forth, but bottom line is we're in a position where we need to cut costs. And the argument I've been trying to make even here with the council is we need to find ways to cut costs without cutting services. And we've been doing a lot of nickel and diming on services for the last 3-4 years. Every time we look at, we're $1 million short, or we're $1.2 million short, or we're $2 million short when we look at the budget. And I'm tired of cutting services. We need to cut cost. This is one way we can do it. Talking in general, not in specific terms, but in general with council members from other cities, they're looking at the same situation. And, this might be an area that they're going to also be looking at. So will we be in this position for long? Maybe not. Other cities are facing the same fiscal challenges, financial challenges that we are. And, everything's going to have to be put on the table. Last thing I would say, one of the officers talked about no traffic unit, no narcotics unit, no gang unit, and, staffing reductions. My hope is that at least with some of the savings, and every time we've had a budget meeting the last 3-4 years, I know I've been arguing for the reintroduction of a police officer position, including this last year, and I think we came about this close to it this last year. In fact, I think it was rather unfortunate the way the discussion went, because at one time it looked like during our discussion over at the library that we had it, and I think we got a lot of hopes up from the officer sitting in the audience, and then all of a sudden we took an about face and didn't go that way. I'd just also say, to be fair, at that meeting, at that budget meeting, I was looking for other ways to cut costs, not services, but costs. And one of the things I was looking at was cutting costs in one area in order to get that police officer. That's one of the things I was after. I don't like, especially not having a traffic unit. The narcotics unit, the gang unit, it's a problem. But I think in day-to-day operations of this city and what we get from citizens when we get complaints, I don't get too many complaints from citizens that, a gang member ran through their backyard or that sort of thing. I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm not saying that if we don't do anything we won't have a problem. But I'm simply saying where I hear the most complaints when I get emails or phone calls or whatnot from folks, it's people are speeding down my street in the morning or in the afternoon coming home from work, and we need to do something, and we need traffic officers, and this is a problem. So I think in terms of day-to-day, that's where I would go with the savings, is we need to get back to having a traffic unit. The other part of it is, I think everybody knows, the only time we see those motorcycles used is hometown days, things like that. They're out during the parade route and so forth. But we've got a fleet of motorcycles sitting in the garage that we don't even use. What a shame that is. So I don't really like doing this necessarily to cut costs, but I think it's necessary. And like I say, I would really hope, council members, that by cutting costs in this area, we can later look at reinstating an officer and building back this force.
Councilmember Royce?
So I have another travel story for you. Just on Thursday this past week, my wife and I were getting a ride in South Africa over to the East Coast. And the woman that was driving us, we had a map out, and I said, well, the airport's over here. Why are we driving this way? And she said, well, in South Africa, in many areas, you drive the main roads. I go, why? She goes, well, if you drive the side roads, they're gravel and they're dirt, and if you run out of gas or you get a flat tire, they will stab you or beat you up or both, and they will take your car. I'm very comfortable after this meeting putting a camera around my neck, and maybe I'm foolish, officers will tell me this, but I think I could walk from one end of Laurel Street to the other end all night long and see some interesting people on the street, but I think my camera would last and I wouldn't get beat up or stabbed. Maybe if I did it 3 nights, but not one night anyway. And but the point of the story is, I think, to the officers and to the citizens of San Carlos, you could anticipate the violation, personal violation of not having public safety. It's incredible what we have here in San Carlos and a lot of other places in the states here. I also, believe, and not only believe, I've done a lot of research of my own in preparation for budget. The police department is the one department who has come down in full-time equivalency headcount since 2000. Most other departments, although they haven't grown much, they've one or two people here, one or two people there. The police department and balancing for dispatch, making an apples-to-apples comparison, is actually come down in staffing, and you pretty much stand alone and still have been able to maintain that service. So I guess what our role in City Council is there's a fiduciary responsibility. Finance comes way at the top. We need to balance a budget. We're going to be very firm with that. I'm going to be very firm with that. And I would hope that the police department can work with us through some tough times here. We only have a 3% growth in the revenue right now, while our headcount costs are fairly well flat, and like in the police department have gone down. Areas like benefits and medical are growing a lot faster than is affordable in our city. And we are looking very closely, not only at the police department, throughout the entire organization, a balance of trying to make it an attractive spot. We need to pay these people fair wages and good benefits. They need to buy houses. They need to live here. They need medical care. But we also can't be foolish from an affordability point of view and spend more than what we can't afford. And just one comment about parking meters, if I could end with that. I truly think it's one of the things that makes us special. I've had one discussion with Greg, and I will go back to him because in poking around our financials, we actually do get money from parking citations, about 120,000, 130,000, if I believe, plus or minus 10,000. Citations, actually a little less. Moving violations, citations equate, when I did the calculation, to about 2 citations per car per 12-hour shift. So to leverage on Matt's comment, I'm not a police officer, but I'd surely rather write one more ticket a day than collect a bunch of quarters out of a meter on the street. So in with that. But the point being taken fairly, I do think, like every department, park and rec and so forth, we do need to look at ways to balance the budget, to get revenue-producing areas. But it's tough times. We're even turning lights off on this gentleman's tennis courts here, all of our tennis courts. It's tough, and I do hope that you distinguished officers and the new officers that came on board today stay with us. It's a great city, and hopefully we could pay you back here in a few years. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Grisilli.
Just to be fair and honest about this, I felt the timing of this, and I spoke to the city manager about this, and also the city attorney. When Mr. Grocott and I were on the fire board, and we were attempting to put the fire department back together again, there were negotiations for a new contract. And one of the items that we put on the table and was accepted was a change from 3% at 50 to 3% at 55. It was, again, in a way I was talking about symbolic earlier tonight. You can't measure it today. You can't measure it tomorrow. In 15 years, you might be able to measure it. The difficulty I have with this issue tonight is sort of the way it is. I think philosophically, I think that we need to look, as Councilmember Royce said, at the benefits and the extra, I shouldn't say extras, the additional compensation that's provided to all city employees up and down our city. Not because we're overpaying anybody. We are not the highest paid city in any way, shape, or form. In some ways, we're at the bottom. In some ways, we're at the middle. I doubt we're above the middle in any area, in any department. But having said that, we have what we have, and that's it. It's as Councilmember Ahmad said, we spent 6 hours trying to figure out how to make a budget come out, where we had to cut over, what is it, $1.2 million, $1.3 million out of a budget. probably over 5%. It was very difficult. We tried not to take any positions, and I think we were successful for the most part, in not taking any positions. I think tonight to make a motion to do this as of July 23rd is, in my opinion, not appropriate. But I have to be honest. I will stand with anyone who is either up here or not, saying that in the negotiation, and the contracts for all our city employees are up, that this is an item that needs to be discussed. When we did the fire contract, we did not go out a month, say a month from now something will change. I believe we went out 6 months or whatever it was to a January 1st issue or January 1st time. That doesn't solve the issue that the speakers have spoken to tonight about retention and about people coming over in a lateral way. I looked at some of the statistics we were given here. It appears that there's apparently that I could find in the peninsula 2 departments, Daly City and Millbrae, that have a 3% at 55.
Okay.
And I think we have 11. And I don't have every city here listed here. 11 on the other side of the ledger. Some of those were passed in 2000, 2001, 2004, 2006, all throughout the last 10 years. Every city has to make a decision on where they want to spend their money. The difficulty we have is we need to make sure that we have services that we can afford, that we can be proud of, that are here in San Carlos. Making these decisions is not easy, and I'm sure everyone realizes that, and I know every speaker does. But having said that, like I said, I can't support this motion tonight, but because I just think it's too quick for July 23rd. But, as I mentioned, I will be supporting some sort of a change that we can hopefully adjust for the benefits, retirement benefits for future, not people that started today, but for July 23rd, but future employees. And I don't do this without a great deal of consternation and thought. And I realize that there could be a situation that's been spoken by some of the speakers that we will get people and they will stay here, we will train them, and we will spend money, perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then they will move on somewhere else. But I do believe, as Councilmember Grocott said, there are other places in this peninsula that are facing some of the same issues we are. Perhaps we're ahead of the curve, perhaps we're behind the curve, perhaps we're completely out of line. I don't know. All I know is what I see in front of me, and that's all I can judge and all I can deal with. And it's a difficult issue. As I said, I won't support it tonight, but I don't want to give the impression that I don't feel it's a very important thing that we need to discuss in great detail, and I would be supporting it in the future for our future contracts. So, again, maybe that's ambivalent. Maybe I'm trying to split hairs here, but I want to make sure that I'm honest and upfront so that people understand, hopefully, where I'm coming from. Thank you.
We did, Chief Rothis did a benchmark analysis of the San Carlos Police Department in comparison with other cities and size of forces and so forth. And in just about every benchmark analysis, we're like the highest performing police force of any comparable city. We have the police force has a lot to be proud of. And I certainly think it's one of the first things that we all talk about in San Carlos is what a safe city it is and what a great place it is. And the demeanor and approach of the department, applying not just laws but spirit of the laws, is one of those things that our community benefits from that's missing in many other communities. And there's no doubt that at this point in time that this action competitively does compromise our position with other cities, with respect to other cities. The gravity of San Carlos's economic trouble has yet to be grasped, I think, by the community because we have it so good. We have a $2.7 million structural deficit. There are, obviously, Vallejo's recently gone bankrupt. because of commitments that they can't fulfill. Above all else, for me personally, I never want to make a commitment that I cannot fulfill. And as difficult as this decision is to talk about, we are in an incredibly difficult situation in the city of San Carlos. And honestly, the things that we have had discussions about lately, whether or not it's closing the Kiwanis building or the idea of a potential tax measure or this item tonight or any of 1,000 different things that we've talked about, boy, they don't come out of any other choice other than we are in serious trouble. And we're seriously compromised with our surrounding cities. We get 11 cents on the property tax dollar. Every other city that surrounds us gets twice that amount. They get twice the amount of funding for police and fire and park and rec that San Carlos does. And San Carlos, I think, is outperforming many of those local cities on half the budget. Half the budget. What we have to do is unilaterally make decisions across the board. I think the council in general, when we're talking about the budget, we wanted to add a police position. Safety, speeding in town are the things that people are concerned about the most. It's a family town. I think pedestrian and speeding issues are a couple of our top problems and a couple of the top things that people are concerned about. But we have an extremely dire financial situation. And it's only with that and a really heavy heart that I support this. And we have to do what we can to right the city financially so we can make commitments we can come through on. I can't look a new officer in the face and say we're going to hire you today and say we can come through on this if we don't start something. And it's got to happen everywhere in every department, whether we like it or not. Just don't have the money, folks. So that's where I stand. With that, council, we should continue to discuss and see if there's a motion before us.
Mr. Mayor, I did have a question for staff. There was some discussion related to the timing of this and that we had to move on this particular action. Could you explain the timing of this issue and why it's now?
The existing contract has language within it that allows for this action pursuant to terms negotiated within that contract during the contract term. The proposal, as initiated tonight, with an initial reading, a second reading, and then the 30 days to have the ordinance be effective, accomplishes that task wholly within the term of the existing contract.
Contract expires July 31st.
So just to be clear, the contract expires July 31st. In the previous contract, we have this right if our expenses exceed 20%. They've been as high as 35 to 40%. Last year, they also exceeded that number. Council contemplated this and decided not to go forward with it because of the importance of it. This year, the deficit continues to slide structurally forward. So. Other discussions?
Well, by rights, we should make a motion and a second, and if we're going to discuss further, so I'm going to move approval of resolution number 2008-31, resolution of intention to approve an amendment to contract between the Board of Administration, California Public Employees Retirement System, and the City of San Carlos.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Without further discussion, Christine, roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Vasili?
No.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Lewis?
Yes. And with that, we will move on.
Through the chair, Mr. Mayor, you also need to introduce an ordinance, a companion ordinance to that
Okay, is that
resolution, I believe.
a subsequent motion?
Right.
Does that entail a subsequent motion, or is that an amendment to the previous motion?
No. This is a new motion for the introduction of the ordinance.
Okay.
So it would be a motion to introduce and then read the title of the ordinance.
I'd make a motion to introduce the ordinance. Is that right?
Yes?
Yes. We would
And read
give
the
the
title.
ordinance number.
1999, and you need to
Date.
read it. Read it. Read the title.
Read the title. Okay, let me get there. Just as I did before?
Right.
Okay, that's why I was doing it before, but okay, I'll do it again. Resolution of intention to...
No.
No? Which one?
Ordinance.
Attachment 2.
Attachment 2.
Attachment.
If you could help us with that language real quick, so it's an ordinance.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Okay.
Here we go. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos authorizing an amendment to the contract between the City Council of the City of San Carlos and the Board of Administration of the California Public Employees Retirement System.
A second.
Roll call, please.
You okay over there, City Clerk?
Yes. Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
No.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Lewis?
Yes. And with that, we move on to item 11A, to review the City Minister's transition plan for Public Works Department.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. As you will note from the staff report, we've outlined some of the history with respect to the Public Works Department in San Carlos, and provided a synopsis for new council members with respect to the plan for transitioning. As the council is aware, Mactari Engineering provides services, engineering services, as well as the supervision of the Public Works Department in San Carlos, and has under contract since 2002, I believe. The plan, as originally conceptualized, created the position of Assistant Public Works Director / City Engineer, with the idea that that position would be filled, the person would work in conjunction with Mactari Engineering, benefit from all of the experience and wisdom of that firm in knowing the city, having worked here for so many years, and potentially be in a position to assume the position of the Public Works Director, City Engineer, once the contract with Mactari expired in June of this year. Now, the plan was implemented from the standpoint of creating the position, filling the position, but unfortunately, early this year, the person in the position accepted a position, an alternative position with another city, leaving us in a bit of a lurch with respect to the plan as we had embarked upon. We immediately contacted the Bob Murray and Associates and entered into an agreement with them to initiate the recruitment for a Public Works Director, City Engineer. Actually, it's a Public Works Director and or City Engineer. We're keeping our options open here because of the difficulty with finding qualified candidates for this kind of a position. But even beginning as quickly as we did, and frankly taking a bit of a risk by having created the job announcement and gotten out front perhaps of the City Council with initiating that process, we still aren't in a position to have somebody on board by the 1st of July. The position formally closed on Friday. We will do interviews this month. We will initiate the interview process. But in all actuality, I would think even under the best case scenarios, it would be August or September before we would have a full-time person on board. Staff still feels that it'd be imperative that there be a transition period of time so that the new person, whomever it may be, will have the benefit of working with Mr. Mactari or Mactari Engineering. And with that in mind, staff approached Mactari Engineering to see whether or not it was even possible or feasible to request an extension on the contract that we have with that firm. Those discussions ensued, and the proposal before you would have an extension with Mactari Engineering for 6 months, with that firm being the Public Works Director / City Engineer up until such time as we have a replacement, at which time the replacement person would assume that title and those, that authority and responsibility. But we still believe it important that we have a transitional period. And so we're proposing that this be for a 6-month period of time so that there can be that transition. I don't have any hesitation in recommending that from the standpoint of the nature of the workload. We've looked at other cities that are our size. Those cities that are our size in the peninsula have between 3 and 8 engineers on staff. The city of Belmont has 5 engineers on staff, for example. Smaller city, similar terrain as the city of San Carlos. We have had the contract with Mactari Engineering. We had the benefit of having a second engineer for a few months. But there certainly is the workload to keep 2 engineers busy. And secondarily, we think that it being of critical importance, given the projects that are underway, street resurfacing projects, the wastewater treatment plant, rehabilitation and pump station, the entire capital improvement program, the improvements to parks, the rehabilitation of our sanitary sewer system, the collection system. I mean, these are all projects and activities that are underway. To have a disruption in those services or those projects, I think would be a disservice to the community. And so with that in mind, we have negotiated a contract with minor adjustments in terms of compensation. You will see from the report that the compensation that we pay Mactari Engineering is well below market in terms of rates. The service that he has provided to the city, I think, has been exemplary, and I have no hesitation in recommending to you that we extend the contract for a period of 6 months to give us the flexibility and the opportunity to have a smooth transition in the Public Works Department. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Weiss, Council? Go ahead.
I was curious about the retainer. What is the typical engagement from Mactari Engineering on this retainer? How many hours a week? Can you just give a little bit more detail?
Yeah, the hours of work, they're tracked and reported to us. They can range anywhere from 25 to 35 to 40 hours per week. It has worked out to in the neighborhood of $135 to $140 per hour. It will vary from month to month. I mean, in December we're not open, but for the 1 week or this last year for 8 days, and so the hours that particular month were a bit less. Typically, Mr. Mactari himself is here from Monday through Thursday, and arrives 6 o'clock in the morning and is here till 3 in the 2 to 3 in the afternoon. He comes to meetings in the evening, meets with residents as necessary. He has, and I work right next door to him, so I can verify personally that he is here. He's committed to doing the job and has been doing the job.
I just had one quick question. How many applicants did we have?
I believe that we are in the neighborhood of 35. What I can't tell you is how many of those are engineers. Not all of them are registered city engineers are capable of serving in that dual capacity.
Would you estimate that we would interview 15 of them?
Typically what happens is Bob Murray and Associates does the initial interview, and depending upon the qualifications of the candidates, again, I have not seen those, and we've not actually been able to talk to Bob today. But typically he would touch base with those that meet the minimum specifications or qualifications, and out of a field of 35, you might have 12 or 15, I would suspect, that he would talk with. Cull the list down to a shorter list. I believe last time I want to say 6 or 7 candidates were interviewed by city staff on ultimately selecting one person.
But we're hopeful with 35 candidates that there's one person there that's going to fit we hope. We haven't seen it. We haven't seen the information, but we hope that one person will.
We do, yes.
Okay. Thank
we
you.
hope.
I have one other question. Yeah. I don't know how we do this because we're being given a recommendation to give an increase. I'm reluctant to negotiate contract in the open like this, but let's say we take this action, but we don't give the increase. What do we got?
I don't know. I've talked with Mr. McTarry. I thought in our conversations, he and I came to the conclusion that this was fair compensation. I personally reviewed the rate schedules of other firms, some of which I've reported here. He's well below market rate. Some of the values that are reported here are values for traffic engineering or support engineering services that he is responsible for paying for. If we're not covering his costs, he can't provide for those services. I'd be more concerned about, a 2% increase, I think, is what we're giving on the retainer. I mean, I'd be more concerned about that if we were approaching market rates for the services that we're providing, but we're well below market rates.
Any other questions for Mr. Weiss? Okay, we'll have council discussion. Mr. Groker, come on.
Well, I'll come out of the gate. I'm sorely disappointed that we're in this position. I will remind the council that this is not the direction I thought we should go at the very get-go, that when we went out to hire, we should have went out for a city engineer. If you want a city engineer, you go out and you try to get a city engineer. You don't get an assistant city engineer, hire him, and then think in 6 months' time you're going to move him up. In fact, even if we had gone that route, if the fellow had stayed around, would we not have been in a position to still interview for others for city engineer? I just don't understand why we went this direction, and now we end up in the position we are. I would furthermore suggest that if we knew we were going to be going for two positions, a city engineer and an assistant city engineer, why didn't we go out and recruit for both at the same time? Perhaps we would not have ended up empty-handed as we have. I don't think it's any secret that I've not been happy with this arrangement, primarily because in all the years that we've had the arrangement, we've never gone out for any kind of competitive review, and still now we are not. And I can, in this instance, I can understand why we aren't, because our backs are up against the wall. So I reluctantly am willing to go forward with this, however, not with the increase. I think the firm has done well with the city of San Carlos over the years that we've contracted, and given the nature of never having gone out and put it in a competitive venue, we in some respects done the man a favor, or his firm a favor. He hasn't incurred the cost of going through that process, and I also think in light of what we just did, and the situation that we all just agreed to financially, giving any kind of increase to this contract, I think is out of line. So I'm willing to go forward with it, but if there's any language of increasing the retainer, then I will not go along with it.
Yeah, so I'm much more, of course, comfortable with the long-term vision, the goal, the light at the end of the tunnel where we're going to be. I think the transition plan is the best that we could do. We got a lot on the plate, and we need to get through it. Matt, you may be right. I think maybe on some of the financial stuff, I kind of looked at some of Mark's work in comparison and so forth. It doesn't seem out of place. You may be right. There may be some place to save something. I'm not sure how much, but maybe we should talk about that. I don't know.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just, from my perspective, this is not a continuation of something new. This is a new contract that we're trying to enter into for the next 6 months. Is that correct?
It's an amendment to the existing contract.
Okay. I look at this, Mr. Mayor, and I kind of go, this is actually a little less than the rate that I am paying for civil engineers in my new company. The cost for solid engineers who actually have some talent and some experience is high. From my perspective, if I can get this rate, frankly, I'll hire it. So the rate doesn't bother me. I've had a challenge in the past that we have a contractor in the position of an acting department head. Bothers me on one level because I think if you're going to be the department head, you need to be the employee of the city, not a contractor. We have a transition plan to move that forward. I don't have a problem with the contract as proposed. I would also not have a challenge with directing staff to go back and see if we can redo do the increase.
I think, hindsight's always 20/20. Perhaps we should have done it a different way, but we are in a difficult situation. I don't think Mr. Mokhtari has to do this. He was going to retire on June 30th. I'm not saying he's doing us a favor because he's certainly getting paid for it. But a 2.6% increase on a rate that Mr. Ahmad said is below what he feels is market rate already, and I don't have any perspective on that, so I'll accede to his information. I voted for the situation that it would end June 30th and we would have a transition. I think for someone, we could say no to this whole thing, and I don't know where we'd be. Well, I guess we'd go out and hire another person, a contractor, to sit for 6 months so that they could have a ramp up to learn about the city just in time to hire a new person who could talk to somebody who had 6 months experience. I think the premium, if it's 2.6% that we're paying, is nominal relative to the information that Mr. Mokhtari is going to be able to give to the next individual that comes in here. And I think that's well worth 2.6% personally, and why I think we need to go forward with this contract. And, let's be honest about this. In 6 months, assuming, that's why I asked Mr. Weiss how many people applied, there could be a situation, dare say, that we're going to be in the same spot again. And Mr. Mokhtari might just say, I'm going on vacation. And that's fine. He could do that now. And that's our problem, not his. So I support this through staff. I support the contract, the 2.6%, and I think we need this for the transition so that the next person coming in has the benefit of the ramp up that has taken I'm not sure how many years, 20 years? Mr. Moore, how long has Mr. Mokhtari been here?
He predates my tenure by about 8 years, so I'd say about 30, I'm guessing.
30 years of experience and knows where not to use a colloquial term, where the bodies are buried relative to somebody who would come in and you get off the street. And you could pay less for them, but what information and what skill set would they have? So anyway, that's where I come down on this, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Yeah, and, from my standpoint, Mr. Weiss and I have had discussions about this, and I wish, like he does, I wish we weren't in this position. It wasn't part of the plan. I actually thought the plan woulda, coulda, shoulda worked, and for a couple of reasons it didn't work. Plans don't always work. The 2.6% increase is within, I think, the overall council goal of trying to keep expenses within our growth, our 2.5% to 3% expected revenue growth. So, I think in all phases, from my standpoint, we're looking at, sort of just basic cost increases that sort of match our revenue, cost of living increases. And I sort of think that's what this represents. $5 on $100. So we need to do this. I don't think, again, we wish we were here. This one is good. There's efficiency with his institutional knowledge. He does the job professionally. He's got great knowledge. It's the best economic deal for where we are. So I say we move forward. That's where I am. Without any further discussion, or if somebody would like more discussion, let's do it, and then we'll get to a motion.
I would like a little more discussion, but go ahead and make the motion, because that's when we do the discussion.
When we have discussion or a motion.
What do we need to do here, Mr. Mayor? Resolution?
Let's take a look. Yes, it's a resolution.
What page would that be? Oh, I see. Make a motion to approve resolution number 2008-
I think we're at number 30.
30, resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos amending a contract with Mokhtari Engineering, Inc. for engineering services.
Second.
Discussion.
Council, I would ask you to consider that it was said earlier when we were talking about the Kyoto letter that was symbolic. It's also symbolic if you hold the line on expenses for someone who has a six-figure contract with the city and show other people who work for this city at a lower tier that we're willing to hold the line and cut costs and do due diligence. Maybe it's symbolic. So is giving the 2%, 2.6% in some regards. And if you do the math on it, it's, the full amount of the retainer is $210,000 a year. I think Mr. McTarry makes about, his retainer is like $198,600 right now. And we're talking about something for 6 months, so we're talking $105,000. What's 2.5% of $105,000? I don't have a calculator in front of me, but we're not talking a great amount of money. But on the other hand, what we are talking about in some regards is the symbolism that, and I see, quite frankly, I see us do this all the time, where we look at these certain positions and we're willing to spend more money, and then we turn around and we say to other folks who work for the city, sorry, we have to cut your hours, or we have to cut your whatever. Or we say to the citizens, we got to close the Kiwanis building, we have to do this over here to save money. I just don't get it, folks. We're on one side spending more money, and on the other side we're saying we have to cut service, we have to raise taxes, we have to go after the homeowner for more money. To me, this is incongruous to have this kind of action. Maybe it's symbolic, but sometimes the symbolism means something. I would suggest we take this forward. I agree, we're in a position where we don't have much choice. But to do it with an increase, I think McTarry Engineering has done very well by this city for reasons already stated for all the years that he's had the benefit of working for the city. And I say that as one who runs my own business, has to go out there and churn the soil every day to get new work. And so to be retired and bring forward a firm and sit in a position where you don't have to worry about going out every day with your shingle and advertising and saying, this is what I do, will you please hire me? He doesn't have that. So, yeah, he's got these rates, Omar. Do you think he has to advertise or spend money on advertising or a lot of other things that your normal engineers have to do, or the engineer that I use to go do the house structures I do, on Industrial Road in San Carlos, who has to, incur the expense of a website and advertising and other things? No, it's not there. Employee benefits, not there. A lot of other things aren't necessarily there because it doesn't have to. He sits in a nice position. So I think we could pass this along without the...
Mr.
Yes.
Grocott, have you seen his books? Are you willing to verify on this dais that he doesn't have any of those expenses and everything goes into his pocket?
Well, I'm just thinking of what it would be like to have a position where you have a retainer with a city that pays you already $198,000 a year, and you're at this city, we were just told, anywhere from 25 to 40 hours a week. How much time do you have to be out there and do other things? Have you looked at his books? Does he have other clients? How many other clients does he have? How much advertising does he do? I don't know. I'm just saying it's a pretty comfortable position to be in, and we're just, feathering the nest a little more, and I think it's a little more than we need to.
Councilmember Rice.
So just to address Councilmember Grocott's comments, I really actually like a lot of what you said. I think there are symbols, and by setting an example of trends that we have going on with our city. The only thing that I would sway for approving the contract is that it's not like a department of 10 people or a group of people that you could hire and so forth. This is a very specific job. It's a very critical job because of our list of capital and projects and things that we have ongoing. There is tremendous value in his expertise. I substantiate the 2% being basically it's 1 week of a 50-week year is what you're paying, an extra week. And with that week comes basically not even a skip of performance, of getting projects done, moving on. There's leverage of a cross-training to the new person. I think you're right. It may be, I think we could bargain less, but to me, 1 week of a year is not worth fooling and risking the relationship, because if the risks are so great, even though it would probably wouldn't happen, but if it did, if we made any change to what's kind of been agreed, I know Mark and Molitari have talked a lot. It's such a small risk, but if it was to go south on us, it would cost us a lot more. So I just really would like to go into a mode of risk aversion to a very critical, customized process that we have in our city. But I totally, I mean, everything you said, I agree with as far as just the uniqueness of this situation.
Any other
I have a
discussion?
question for staff.
Please.
Yes. We're going to go into a period, you said, of 6 months. So this is going to cover us for the gap of still yet unhired, and then working with the newly hired city engineer, public works director. Is that right? About 6 months?
It's a 6-month contract, yes.
Okay. So we're paying a retainer of $17,500 a month. Can we expect to get into a period towards the end of those 6 months, say in the last 2 months, where, especially 40 hours a week is definitely not necessary, and maybe it's down to 10 or 15, and therefore, can the retainer be reduced?
I guess I'd be more concerned about that if we didn't have so many projects on the table, if we weren't so severely understaffed in that department, if we didn't have another engineer position budgeted that is necessary. Now, with respect to the earlier comment relative to filling that position, we could go out and advertise for the Assistant Public Works Director, City Engineer position. Frankly, I don't expect that we'll hire it at that level. What I'm hoping, what I'm expecting is that we'll be able to hire a Public Works Director, City Engineer. And if we're able to find that right combination, I'm hoping that we'll be able to advertise for something equivalent to perhaps a senior engineer, as opposed to an Assistant Public Works Director, Assistant Engineer. But I don't know that until I see who the candidates are and get a better read on their qualifications and expertise. I mean, there may be a determination. There are provisions within the contract whereby, we can sever if there's, if there's a desire on either side to do that. But, our relationship is such and the projects and workload is such that I just don't anticipate that that's at all likely.
So, Council, we have a motion before us. How about a vote on the motion? Christine?
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Lewis?
Yes. With that, we'll move on to item number 8E, which was pulled from the consent calendar. And this is the authorizing the city manager to execute an amendment to the general plan contract with Design Community Environment, DCME, in the amount of $71,875 for consulting services for inclusion of the climate action plan. I've got a couple speaker cards after you're done.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deborah Nelson, Planning Manager. We went out, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District had a grant funding for the preparation of climate action plans. We had already presumed that we had actually planned to do an analysis of climate action with our general plan. But having received the grant in December, we were then able to look further for a greater level of detail in our climate action efforts. And we talked to a number of companies to get proposals to augment what we had presumed would be in our general plan. And let me go back to say that when we applied for the grant, we collaborated with San Carlos Green, and in fact, they helped us write that grant, and we still see that collaboration going forward. We will work with them quite closely. We plan to do at least 5 meetings with the GPAC and subcommittee. They'll be meeting before the Planning Commission and City Council, and we would, as staff to San Carlos Green, also work, and with our consultants, work to the level that we need to. We think it's important to link the climate action plan to our investigation of land use that will go on in the general plan, because there is such a great linkage. Our climate action plan proposal looks at the best practices. You talked about that earlier this evening, and also economic tests. So we will look at the actions that we can do that are economically viable for us to do. Another comment that came up this evening, I'm sorry, that I want to address, is the Bay Area Air Quality Management District work program. That work program was developed based on what we had proposed with what was in our existing general plan. That work program has deliverables and milestones that are absolutely necessary for us to get reimbursement. It's a reimbursement grant. So we obviously, as stated earlier, are behind already. We will mesh this program with our General Plan Review Committee. We will not push anything forward than the schedule that we will mesh with them. So our reimbursement payment will probably not be June 30th of 2008, but hopefully in the fall we will be able to produce the deliverables that are required. So as a subcontractor, PMC will be working with DC&E, and we would like you to approve that amended contract. It's fully funded by grant.
Great. With council's permission, because this was basically pulled by the public, because there's 2 public comment slips, I'd like to let the public make their statements, and maybe staff could respond to that if there's a question. I'm not sure. Council member actually pulled it. So if we could have Suzanne Emerson please come up for your 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Suzanne Emerson, a St. Carlos resident and a member of the St. Carlos Green Task Force. The only issue that I saw when I looked over these materials was a little disconnect between the Bay Area Air Quality Management District work plan and the contract that's been proposed for the consultants when it comes to public input. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District grant specifically talks about how the city is going to work with GPAC, and then they're going to develop greenhouse gas reduction strategies, and then they're going to present these at a public workshop to secure input into prioritizing the policy alternatives. At San Carlos Green, we're very interested in making sure that there's a strong tie-in with what the public is thinking, and that the public has a good chance to be involved in the decision-making on the climate action plan, because we think that's crucial in order for it to be successful. My concern, though, is that the scope of work for the contractors doesn't talk about an open to the public workshop. It talks about several GPAC meetings and a GPAC subcommittee meeting. It doesn't talk about one in which these issues are provided a workshop where everyone can come and give their opinion in something more than a 2-minute discussion, afterwards, perhaps. And that's the only concern I have.
Great. Thank you very much. Jay Hall, if Jay's still here. Yeah, I think what we'll do is give staff the ability to respond to some of this after then. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Lewis and council members. I'd just like to echo a lot of what Suzanne's comments were, that when we looked at this, it didn't seem to have adequate provision for public comment. And so I'm here to speak in favor of having a climate action task force, specifically for addressing climate action. At least 10 other cities in San Mateo County have had these task force and have had very good results with them. And we've got a lot of talented people and involved businesses in our community that could add a lot to this process. And I think it does, 2 things. You have an educated, energized core group of citizens which can outreach to the community and help generate awareness for what we're doing with the climate action plan. And secondly, they're invested in the process and the results, so that once you have your plan, if you want to move into implementation, you've got a core group of people who were there when it was created and can help put it into action. So I would just ask you to consider making a climate action task force a part of the plan. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Ms. Nelson, Ms. Nelson, would you like to respond to certainly the first comment where it had to do with the public input within the documentation?
There are in the general plan schedule public workshops where GPAC hosts people. We haven't gotten to the specifics of that. Certainly one of the GPAC meetings proposed could be a public workshop. Also, the amount of work that we do with the subcommittee can include input from various other people as we do that as well. But we're satisfied that they're, both by the term of the process and working it through the General Plan Advisory Committee, that we will meet the needs that you've talked about tonight on adopting your climate action plan.
Thank you. Council discussion on this?
About some questions.
Sure. Questions, discussion?
Yes, a couple of questions, two questions. First one is the grant, Deborah, you say is from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. And where do they receive their funding from?
Oh, you'd have to give me a minute to look at the papers, but it's, I think it's federal government based then to the local districts, but I'll have to look at that.
Okay.
They had somewhere around $7 million that they awarded to various communities.
Okay. And the Pacific Municipal Consultants, as sub-consultants, I take it, to the consultants we've hired to do the general plan, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And how many other firms were looked at?
We looked at about 3 total, which is not uncommon. There are...
there were 3? I mean, our municipal code requires to look at so many. Can we respond to that?
Yeah, Mr. Council Member, since this is a subcontract to our contractor who's doing the general plan, the city is not required to go out and do an RFP because they're being hired directly by the primary contractor for the general plan. And in fact, they came with a team of individuals for noise analysis, traffic analysis, air quality analysis. So they when we interviewed all the different teams for the general plan, they all came with a package of different consultants. So that's, the city is not required legally, and perhaps the city attorney can speak to that, but again, it's their contract. We're asking you to change the contract that we have with our primary to just augment the dollar value of that. And so they would be managing that contract.
Does that mean then that we're paying this firm here, and then they're turning around and paying the subcontractor?
That's
Is that
correct.
Right? Mm-hmm. Okay. But back to my question, I'm still interested, how many other firms did we look at? Or did they look at? Who else was looked at?
We looked at 3 other firms. Our main
We did or they did?
Together.
They recommend, okay, together, collaboratively, yeah.
The PMC proposal, the matrix, the economic tests, the public participation process, the fact that they work closely with ICLEI, sorry to use that term, and I'm not sure what it stands for, but that is the group that's involved with the work that Brian is involved with on the various inventories, both our citywide inventory and the peninsula inventory that you will be receiving shortly in the next couple of months. So it was a number of factors that came together that made them the strongest in our opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, or do you have questions as well?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you let you sit down. You had mentioned that there is going to be a subcommittee to do this. Could you explain the structure of how this is going to be put together?
Actually, Deborah, perhaps I could answer that question. I was going to cover that, Mr. Councilmember, in my presentation regarding the general plan, but I can just quickly address it for you. The idea is that it's a very intensive package of analysis that would be required for this, the climate action plan, in addition to, there's another thing called the housing element that they're doing as well, which is also extremely intensive. So it would be staff's recommendation that a GPAC subcommittee be formed for both of those items, and each of those subcommittees would be small working subcommittees that would go off with a consultant and a staff member and do really intensive work with the consultant and staff, and then come back and make recommendations to the GPAC, where the whole of GPAC can discuss their analysis in perhaps a draft of a climate plan. These would be, the intent is to make these open to the public. We understand, and I've actually spoken to a number of people in the community who are really interested in this and have a lot of expertise in different areas of the environmental world. And so the intent is to make these subcommittee meetings public meetings, just like the GPAC meetings, so they could attend, they would be advertised, people could attend, people could provide the subcommittee with information and contribute in that way. In addition, it would go back to the General Plan Advisory Committee, and that's a public meeting as well. And perhaps, and we haven't talked about this, is the subcommittee could have some kind of a public event or public meeting on its own, so we can talk to the subcommittees about that. We will be approaching the General Plan Advisory Committee with this idea at their next meeting.
Do you have any comments? So the only other thing, and this is just discussion now, so I don't have any specific questions of staff, except for Al, you may want to chime in. San Carlos Green, because we can't really afford to keep task forces and subcommittees fully supported the way we might, San Carlos Green has taken on a lot of volunteer efforts to help us in this regard. Is there, I think their inclusion in anything we're doing that has to do with environmental issues would be germane to, they're a talented bunch and they're have a lot of energy and enthusiasm and volunteerism. So is there a way that we can, orchestrate that they'd be involved in some of that subcommittee?
Yes, and the idea is, and one of the things I was going to present to you in the next steps is that Susan Emerson is a founding member of San Carlos Green, and also has a seat on the General Plan Advisory Committee. I've spoken to Suzanne about being a member of the committee. I think it's critical. The reason we have a chair on GPAC from the environmental community is exactly for that purpose, to get that expertise there. And then there would be a couple of other positions for other people that would bring something to the table.
Well, Al, for me personally, I'm really happy to hear that you're getting as much public input as possible. That seems to be one of the issues. The other issues is the San Carlos Green expertise and respecting that effort and including that as well. So that certainly satisfies me. Is there a
Mr. Mayor, move for the approval of item 8E.
Second? Second. Any other discussion?
I'll just say that I'm going to vote against this, and I think it's no secret why, because I don't agree with this language of climate change and so forth and the assumptions that are made. It seems inconceivable perhaps that I would vote against a grant we're going to receive the money that's going to pay for this. But that's why I asked the question about where does this money come from. Money comes from the federal government, comes from the taxpayers, and this makes my point that I said earlier. We're getting into regulation and costs and increased taxes, increased cost of government. This is not going to stop anytime soon, and it's going to impact us in many ways, and I think it's hugely unfortunate. We can do the right thing in a lot of areas, about pollution and so forth. I don't see us doing it under this umbrella, and so I intend to vote against this.
Okay. In lieu of other discussion, Christine?
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Lewis?
Yes. With that, we'll go on to item 8F, which was, I'm sorry, who requested 8F? You want to give us a heads up on why you...
Sure, let staff give a report.
Do we want to... Okay. Or if you want to, oftentimes with consent, if one pulled it, we try to go right to the heart of it, given the hour and the amount we still have yet to do tonight.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I read the background, it says that this statement didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And I know we this was presented to us before under a budget deal, but it seems we've got this position, we've got a person in the position, and then under background it says there's 3 primary factors for this recommended reclassification. First, the city has over the years planned, implemented, and integrated over 10 enterprise and departmental systems that require programming and creative expertise not required of a systems analyst. The senior systems analyst classification will be directly responsible for these new duties, and it sounds to me like these are old duties, and so the only reason I can see for doing this is to step somebody up in their classification and therefore their pay.
Okay. Jeff Malpe, City's Administrative Services Director, and I'm also the department head that's over the IT function. As the council is aware, as Councilmember Grocott alluded to, we did deal with this issue as part of the budget. Existing now, the budget hasn't been adopted yet. The city has 3 systems analysts. One of those 3, a vacant position, was recommended by staff for elimination. That's a reluctant elimination, as all our eliminations have been. So that would bring us down to 2 systems analysts serving the city. This proposal would elevate one of those 2 positions to a senior systems analyst, so that we would have 1 senior systems analyst and a systems analyst working for the city. The reasoning behind that, obviously, when you're talking about their existing duties, you're right about that, but it's a rearranging of existing duties amongst a staff that, instead of consisting of 4 people, 3 systems analysts and an IT manager, consisting of only 3 people. So there would be new duties assigned to the actual individuals. But one of the biggest problems we've got is our 3 systems analysts, between them, they all started in the city about the same time. They all had about 8 or 9 years of experience, and we lose 2 of them to go elsewhere to take senior systems analyst jobs. We do very much want to hold on to the expertise of our 3rd remaining systems analyst, and recognize that the level of expertise that we require of that person, the city depends on the person to provide the functions, is at a higher level now, that we need that person and we want to retain that person, that specific individual, and to also have a position at that level because of the types of duties that are there. When I started with the city, many of the systems that we have now didn't exist. We contracted out our phone system with a third-party vendor, and several years ago the council purchased a system that the city's able to administer ourselves. Well, the phone system cost a couple $100,000, but we save, about $60,000 a year in terms of the cost that we were paying a third-party person. We did not add any staff when we did that. That was just incorporated into the existing staff. So there's been a lot of efficiencies along the way, but that does sort of result in a compounding of new systems and new responsibilities that have been added to the IT function without adding employees, and in fact now reducing an employee. So that's really the reasoning behind this.
One more question. We had in our original report, the salary amount was $92.13, and when we came in from closed session, we had a new form that puts it in agreement with the attachment. That was actually one of my questions, so I appreciate the new material. However, it makes me question this figure of $20,300. Is that still the same?
It's still the same, yes.
That's still the same.
And it was just simply a typo. The staff report number, the number in the attachment was the number that we've been using all along.
and it just
Sure, but
didn't-
you understand why I asked, because,
Oh, yeah,
we go
absolutely.
from, okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to approve resolution number 2008-28.
28? Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos establishing a new pay schedule for certain city employees in the mid-management group.
Second.
Any further discussion? Christine?
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Lewis?
Yes. And with that, we move on to our last item of the evening, which is a study session for preferred land use alternatives proposed for the general plan update with recommendations for the Planning Commission. My guess is this is going to be more than 30 minutes, and we may need a motion from council to extend the meeting beyond 10:30.
Want to go to 11? Mr. Mayor, move to extend the meeting to 11 p.m.
A second?
Second.
Roll call, please, Christine.
Councilmember Ahmad?
I guess we'll go all in favor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Sorry, Christine. All right.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. As you know, we're currently in the midst of our general plan update, and this evening we are prepared to give you a presentation. I think at this hour I'm going to ask our consultants. We were prepared to give you a more in-depth presentation, and I think that what we'll do is we'll try to give you an abbreviated presentation and then open it up for questions. But meeting directly with you in this setting, and Ben, I'm going to have to ask you to switch through the slides for me.
Please excuse me for a second, but because it's a little bit late, and I know the presentation and comments from council go on for a while, I want to give the two public speaker slips that I've gotten certainly the opportunity to make their comments now, if you would like, because we're going to probably talk for a little while.
That's fine.
If you
Yeah,
prefer to make your comment now, with all due respect to staff, if with your permission, we'll take a comment just before you get kicking.
That works for us.
Is that okay?
Yes.
It's just because we've gone on. So Robert Stafford and then Jeff Peterson, if you would also like to make comments now, you're welcome to wait. I'm just trying to do it for your benefit. Okay. So Robert Stafford, please.
Thank you, Mayor Lewis. And my focus is a few comments with respect to the GPAC and the general plan update. But I'd like to reserve a little time just to comment on what the law enforcement was bringing up today.
You have a couple minutes, so however you want to use them.
I think the way in which we need to look at what's going on right now with the general plan update is to what's going to give staff, the people that understand the nuances, the most latitude. And when you look at this presentation, I think it's clear that Alternative 3 is going to give the town and its citizens the most opportunity to truly be sustainable. What is a sustainable community at this point? One that has a tax base. And when you look at the proposals, 3 does that. Specifically, I think we need to start focusing in on how the below market rate program works in conjunction with the general plan. Right now, there's no in lieu fees in the ordinance for below market rate. I think one of the things we have to do is give these tools, the money, back to the city so that larger policy agendas can be accomplished. With respect to law enforcement, how are we going to continue to retain when we don't have the money and we don't have housing? Currently, there's not one law enforcement or, I think, teacher in below market rate housing. That's a sin against policy. So I think what we have to do is, Mark Zawicki is a very accomplished person that has very few tools to effectuate policy. Put some money back into his budget, and I think the in lieu fees do that. The other thing is, we've got to codify in our ordinances incentives for LEED certification. Currently, we want LEED certification. This is what everyone's clamoring for. But the ordinances don't match up to the requirements of LEED certification. So I think to the extent that the general plan is going to encourage green alternatives in every facet of our community, I think that the disconnect is our ordinance need to harmonize with that. And then lastly, a comment on public works. I agree with some of the sentiments that Matt brings up, but the facts are this. that in this critical budget time, the expertise of a consultant like Parviz, I think, is invaluable. We're going to be looking more towards grants than ever before. You can see what he did in industrial was way ahead of his time. So I think overall, as you look at the general plan update, I think what we have to do is put some policy tools back in the city's hands as you evaluate. And I strongly urge the adoption of Plan 3, which will give the town the latitude it needs instead of the incremental of the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, council members. On the earlier tennis court lighting issue, we were just convinced that the council didn't have all the information needed for a full perspective, and I will follow up with you by email to try and advance that issue and ease further consideration. I wanted to switch to a different, more good news story that does not fall into the problems of the operating budget. As I'm sure you're well aware, the city suffers from not enough park and playing field space, and with program cuts in addition, this is creating a great need for alternative sport offerings to absorb basketball players, volleyball players, softball players, alternatives for youth, and so on. You may not be aware of the fact that in the 2007 Sports Equipment Manufacturers Survey in the U.S., tennis is the #1 sport in the U.S. For growth. In the past decade, of 114 sports, only 3 grew: tennis, golf, and football. Tennis outgrew the other 2 by a factor of 5. San Carlos versus 10 neighboring cities in which many of us play tennis is 10th or lowest in number of courts per population of public and private courts offered to the population. There is currently an undesignated use 4 acres of park space on Crestview, sort of across the road from the Vista Park location today, that has generally been viewed as not suitable for large playing fields, too far afield for a dog park or community center, basically struggling with what should it be other than a potential trailhead. It is an excellent location for an anchor tennis court facility that would add capacity to the community, and the community currently does not have capacity to support ongoing activities. We are working closely with the Park and Rec Department and the Commission relative to the master plan for Park and Rec that is in development, but we simply want to get this onto radar for City Council, hopefully into consideration at the next council meeting for a little more in-depth discussion, as we'd like to have that designated so that we can do fundraising for that facility.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your indulgence. Please come on up, and we're ready for the presentation.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. And to continue, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to get council's review and comment of the draft land use alternatives before they're presented to a public workshop in July. And the desired outcome is to provide these, any changes that you think are necessary or any comments that you have back to the General Plan Advisory Committee at their upcoming meeting. I'd like to make a couple of introductions before I continue. This is Ben Noble. He's project manager with the Design Community and Environment, who is our primary consultant for the General Plan update. And this is Steve Nowak. He's principal with the firm, and he's overseeing the project as well. Karen Hong is actually working for the city as a project manager on our team to help us with this process. So they're here tonight. I'm going to hand over the presentation in just a couple of minutes to Ben, and he's going to do an abbreviated walkthrough of the land use alternatives. But I'd like to, in terms of the process, it says we are here. It's not terribly easy to read there. We're at the general plan alternative stage. We're almost, let's say, half or so way through the process. We're developing these land use alternatives. We've gone through a visioning process with the community. We've developed a background characteristics book, a snapshot of the community, and a number of other things. Now, what I'd like to do is take a step back, and if you could change to the next slide, and look at the growth context. And I think it's important to kind of take a bird's eye view of things. These growth statistics that you see here are really quite astounding, I think. In California is a great place to live, and as we all know, San Carlos is a fantastic place to live and work. And if you look at these statistics, you see that at least from a projection standpoint from various groups, it's projected that change is on the horizon, whether we like it or not, and we really need to be prepared. More people are going to want to move into San Carlos. In San Carlos, the population is currently about 28,000. At the bottom there, you see Association of Bay Area Governments projecting our population to go up by about 22% in the next 30 years or so. Again, that's just a projection. Now, short-term horizon, the regional housing needs assessment that the city has now agreed to be a part of, which is all the cities in the county of San Mateo have agreed to get together and share the burden of housing for the region. If cities didn't agree to do this, and cities are pretty much mandated by the Association of Bay Area Governments to take numbers that the association comes up with, but they allowed us to gather together and do some trading and have a reduction of our number. So our number for the next 7 years is 599 housing units over the next 7 years. But the big question is, how do you maintain your quality of life? And I'm going to ask just a couple of questions before I talk about this slide. So what do we do with the increasing pressures that we've heard about for increased resources, for where are we going to put our parks, where are we going to put our housing, where do our police and our firefighters and our clerks live? Where are we going to do, where are we going to do all this, and are we going to need more of everything that we have, or are we going to sustain what we have? And how are we going to pay for all this? There's implications to the land use alternatives that are before you tonight for economics, and we can talk about this. But I think that all these questions, they're important questions, but I really believe that all these questions can be answered as part of our general plan update process. Next slide, please. And the question now is, well, why prepared land use alternatives now? And I think we decided to ask this question and sort of try and answer it because it's sort of a counterintuitive process. What I've been approached with is people that say, well, why aren't you looking at policies and objectives first? Why are you coming up with land use first? It's sort of counterintuitive. But planning is sometimes like that, I think. I've learned that it's sometimes it's counterintuitive. It's somewhat of an art form. But the idea is that if you take a bird's eye view of our community and you look at the land in our community, the people of San Carlos, the councils, the commissions, the people that sit on our GPAC know this community better than anybody else. We are the experts. Our community, the people that live here are the experts. We know, you know, where things are happening in our community, where change is occurring. So the idea that you take this bird's eye view of land use, it's intended to facilitate discussion about how the city should grow over the next 20 years. And it allows you to then explore the different ways you can look at goals and values in your community. We talk about 600 units. The first question that I always get is, well, where are you going to put these 600 housing units? By looking at these land use alternatives, we're able to, again, take that bird's eye view, look down and see where exactly in the community this can happen. And then we can see if it's good for the community or not. And again, it allows us to look at the varying intensities of these different growth or build-out scenarios. And you've got these build-out scenarios in your package there. It talks about the number of housing units that could be generated by each one of these alternatives. Each different alternatives, or the amount of commercial that can be generated here. And that has implications for the economic development of our community. Moving on. So the land use alternatives that are before you tonight were generated by through input from the General Plan Advisory Committee. We've talked to you before in the past at study sessions, the Planning Commission. We've talked to the community pretty extensively. And so these have been refined, I think, over the last few meetings by the General Plan Advisory Committee and also reviewed by the Planning Commission. And at the last Planning Commission meeting, the primary issues that were raised at that time was the commissioner that now sits on the GPAC, Commissioner Wassa, noted that she would like to see identification of some other retail sites in the non-residential or in the residential areas of the community, and these are Area 12 on your land use maps, and we can talk about that. And also one of the things that we've heard from a number of people on the GPAC, and we had a very extensive discussion about the process at our last meeting, is that things are moving too fast, that it's just we don't have enough time at these meetings to get into the depth and level of detail that we would like to. And I think what my answer to that is yes, you're right. It's an ambitious 2-year schedule, but I think I'm very pleased personally with the success of the GPAC and the things that they've come up with so far. I think they've made some very sound decisions. So we are pushing pretty hard to get this done in 2 years, but it's a 20-year plan, and I think it's entirely reasonable, the process that we're going through now. And I think that what we've tried to explain to the General Plan Advisory Committee, that they will have plenty of time to talk about goals and policies and more for each of the elements. So that was some of the comment. There was one other comment from a GPAC member, but I think she was referring to herself as member of the public about the speed of the process and also the importance of affordable housing. Next, please. And this you can't see very well. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but it shows you the process. On the left side is the GPAC meetings. We've got about 5 more GPAC meetings scheduled. They're going to be going back through the land use alternatives. Eventually, they'll be coming forward to you with a preferred land use alternative. So it may be that this land use alternative could potentially be a hybrid of the 3 that are before you this evening. But this just lays out the process for you and the community. And next, please. And then, and we talked about earlier, this lays out the next steps in the process. We talked about earlier the idea of these subcommittees. And so what I've done is showed you that housing, the idea is you'd have a housing chair, which you have on GPAC. You have a west side and east side residential representative. For the climate, you'd have the environmental chair, someone with a technical background, and perhaps someone from the business community to get a reality check on the economics of it. So this is what we'll be presenting at the next General Plan Advisory Committee meeting. I've talked to the chair people about it, and we'll see if they agree with that recommendation. And then we'll be moving forward with the land use alternatives after this. And I'd like to just hand it over now to Ben, and he can take a few minutes to walk you through the land use alternatives, and then we're available to answer any questions. Ben?
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council, for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Again, my name is Ben Noble with Design Community Environment, and Steve Nowak is here as well as principal in charge of this project. And given the late hour, I'm going to try to move along quickly. I do want to emphasize the point that Al made, that ultimately the GPAC is going to submit to the City Council a recommendation on a preferred land use alternative. We fully expect that that recommendation will be a hybrid of these 3 land use alternatives that are before you tonight. That's always the way it works. It's the way it's going to work this time around. So please keep in mind as you're commenting on these land use alternatives that the GPAC, the general public, the Planning Commission, and the City Council itself is going to be able to pick and choose individual components of these 3 land use alternatives when you put together a preferred land use alternative. But we do present, as part of the process, 3 alternatives, and we find that that's helpful in order to conceptualize broad sort of futures for the city in terms of the direction that the city could go in terms of land use. So we have 3 alternatives. One is the existing general plan with some minor modifications. And the second is a mixed-use focus that introduces moderate additional housing and commercial beyond the existing general plan in the west side of the city, and moderate mixed-use housing and commercial on the east side of the city. And then we have alternative 3, which is concentrating the maximum amount of housing growth on the west side of the city, primarily in downtown and along El Camino Real, and then focusing job growth and economic development on the east side of the city. And alternative 3, particularly in regards to the land use designations along Industrial Road, can be seen as the full implementation of the economic development plan that was recently adopted by the City Council. So here before you are maps of the land use alternatives. This is alternative 1, which is existing general plan with minor modifications. And here is alternative 2, which is the mixed-use focus on the east and the west side. And I'm going to briefly highlight.
Could you just double-check focus on that? I don't think it's my eyes.
It's not, Mr. Mayor. And Ben, perhaps the overhead would be clearer. I think we've been told that
honestly, some of these were hard to read but before I was hoping we'd get actually some more clear images if possible. But it's a tough one to see right now.
Yeah, we'll try and get the other technology to work here.
That's better. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Much better.
That should be adjustable as well.
Pushing forward. But no man has gone before.
Another option is to look at some sort of close-up views of individual study areas rather than to talk about the overall maps.
Yeah, however you feel is best. It's just a legibility issue.
Here we go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Almost.
Here's alternative 1, existing general plan with some minor modifications. We've cleaned up some things in terms of inconsistencies and ambiguities. But what you see before you now is essentially what the existing general plan and the zoning code together allows in terms of land uses in San Carlos. So here's alternative 2, which is the mixed use on the east side and the west side alternative. And I'll point out some highlights. In study area 1, which is here, we're introducing the idea of allowing mixed use along San Carlos up to Prospect. And I guess I would say in response to this that one of the things that we really tried to do with these land use alternatives was to connect our vision statement and some of the preliminary input that we received from the public regarding key issues and explore some different ways that the land use alternatives could address those issues. And one of the things that we heard over and over is that the community is interested in a walkable, pedestrian-oriented environment. And one of the things that we've learned as land use planners is that if you have a mixture of uses, particularly residential and retail and personal services within close proximity, that facilitates a more pedestrian-friendly environment. So the GPAC and staff and consultants decided to include as something to study the introduction of this mixed use along east or along San Carlos Avenue. Another highlight in alternative 2 is the introduction of mixed use along Old County Road, close to the train station, and along East San Carlos to replace the existing light industrial that exists in that area.
Ken, can I
Yes, sir.
just one question, because, well, I'll probably have more, but as I dove into this, I think these templates, after you look at them 3 or 4 times, really start making sense. But I had a couple open questions, how it affects this table on where the growth is. When I saw mixed use, to me that means, retail generally on the bottom and residential upstairs, or it could be offices, or it could be mixed, it could be something else. But generally retail on the bottom. So when you look at alternative 2 and alternative 3, there's a residential piece, there's an office piece, there's an allocation. Based on area, you made assumptions that upstairs was offices in some cases or residential in others. How did you allocate? Because mixed use means multiple things. How did you make assumptions on that.
This was a question.
Or what's the, let me go back to the basic question. What do you mean by mixed use?
For the purposes of these alternatives, we mean ground floor commercial with upper floor residential or office.
Commercial or which is retail, generally, mostly.
And this was
and upstairs what?
Residential or office.
Okay.
Through the chair, you didn't say that. Say it again. You didn't say retail. You said commercial. That's different to me. I mean, is that the same? Are you saying it's the same?
I'm saying commercial, which I would include retail as well as personal service.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that you're defining it, so I just want to make sure we understand it.
Okay. And in fact, just for the fellow council members, because I had a discussion with Al, I said, what is commercial? And well, in fact, maybe the best way, would you like to I think it's really good to make sure we have a common definition of commercial, office, and industrial. I understand it now, but I didn't until I talked to Al. And I'm assuming if we're all thinking different things, we're going to be in trouble.
Sure.
Can you define that?
Mr. Council Member, and what we've done is we've provided you with a desk item, and it says pages from the general plan land use element, and what we've done is we've given you the current land use element definitions of land uses, and we've highlighted the headings on them for you, and so it kind of, you don't have to really get into this, but the idea is that our current general plan has a definition for just about every kind of land use there is in our current land use map. So it talks about single family, it talks about commercial, and when it talks about commercial, it divides it into retail core, which is like the downtown area where you have food establishments and personal services, and highway service, which contains like automobile-related and trade activities, and also offices, and then service and convenience commercial, which is areas designated for retail sales, and also personal services. So our current general plan has definitions, and it's always a good place to start to just look at what we have. And so Randy and I had that conversation. Now, I did notice that we had also given you some land use designations for land use alternatives as in your packet too, and that was one of the attachments, and that gives you our current thinking on. It's attachment 4, description of land use designations, and it gives you our current definitions of what we think of all these things. Because we think that some of the ways that the current general plan defines land uses is confusing, and it's better to kind of try and clean it up as much as possible and be more specific like you're asking now. But on this page, it talks about mixed-use commercial and industrial uses, and it kind of defines things a little more clearly, and it even goes as far as to say how many dwelling units per acre we're talking about here. And then it goes on to talk about planned industrial and office and research and development. So I think this is the one that if you're going to talk about definitions, you should probably use this.
It does point out how old our general plan is. It's under highway service, we have on and off sale liquor establishments. Huh, interesting highway service. Sorry, go ahead, Councilmember Royce. Did you have something?
Yeah, so again, I want to make sure we get off on the right start in this. We're going to be wasting a lot of time. On the definition then of mixed use, when I go to the designations or the definitions in our current general plan, it says it's, whether or not it's low, medium, or high density, it's commercial, which is the retail we're talking about predominantly, and multifamily residential. It doesn't say office. You said residential or office, and I still go back to my question, how do you allocate between those two? And it's different than our definition here.
One of the goals of the general plan update will be to revisit our definition of these land use categories to precisely reflect what the city wants to allow as part of these categories. And with this issue of mixed use, there was a lot of discussion within the GPAC about whether or not it should be just ground floor retail with residential above, or whether it should be a little bit more permissive and allow ground floor commercial, which could be restaurants, retail, personal services, and then office or residential above. And the GPAC actually had a strong feeling that our mixed-use definition should allow for office above ground floor commercial in addition to residential. There's a lot of concerns on the GPAC about adding too much residential and what kind of burden that would have on the city, particularly from a fiscal perspective. So they wanted to open the door in these land use alternatives to allowing non-residential uses above commercial as part of this mixed use designation.
So my question is, when you look at build-out analysis, and we have alternative 2, which does a lot of more mixed use, how do you come up with a number for office and a number for residential?
We had to make some assumptions. And for mixed use, we assumed that for the upper story portion of the development, that on average, we would see 75% residential and 25% office.
That answers the question. Good. Thank you.
So to highlight a couple key points, several GPAC members expressed concern over high-density residential located along El Camino Real. They thought that that might not be the most appropriate location for this residential. It was a minority opinion, but there were some who felt that way. And so they requested that as part of our land use alternatives, we look at introducing a commercial use along a portion of El Camino Real so that we could study that as part of the land use alternatives and to receive public input on this possibility. So land use alternative 2 in the southern portion of El Camino Real includes an area that's regional retail. It was sort of a kind of a last-minute addition, but it's in there as one of our draft alternatives for now. Another key concept that you see in alternative 2 is the introduction of a designation in the east side that provides for greater flexibility. Currently, there's a land use designation called planned industrial, which allows for industrial R&D flex space type uses. There was some concern that that was too restrictive, and that in order to allow for a sort of more dynamic economy on the east side, that we should have a land use designation that would allow different types of uses. So we have a new land use designation called planned industrial office that would allow office uses in addition to the sort of existing industrial flex and R&D space that is currently allowed. And in study area 5, you can see this dark blue. That's an area in alternative 2 that was designated as part of this planned industrial office land use designation. Another key highlight of alternative 2 is the introduction of some mixed use in an area that some people would consider sort of a core of the commercial part of the east side area. That's along Britton Avenue. This was another sort of topic of considerable debate within the GPAC, the idea of how much additional residential we should allow in the east side. And so in alternative 2, in addition to the mixed use along Old County Road and East San Carlos, we also have this pocket of low density, actually I think it's medium density mixed use along this area of Britton Avenue. And another concept that you see in alternative 2 is a land use designation right here that we called building construction. And one of the thoughts on the GPAC is that we needed a land use designation sort of the opposite of planned industrial office that was more restrictive, so that we could focus on sort of our San Carlos's sort of core industrial businesses, which are the building and construction industries. And the idea is that in order to protect and promote those industries, that we should have a land use designation that would prohibit other types of uses from locating in this area. Again, this was an idea that the GPAC wanted to study as part of the land use alternatives, and you see it here in alternative 2. So those are some of the highlights. I can't forget to talk about study areas 12. One of the issues that came up was related to sort of a environmentally sustainable lifestyle. And what does that mean? And a lot of GPAC members felt that, well, that means having more services, non-residential uses within close proximity of where people live. And when we look at the map of San Carlos, we see sort of a very sort of fine-grained mixture of uses closer to downtown, but when you get up into the hills and the residential areas, it's exclusively residential. So some of the GPAC members wanted to look at the possibility of introducing some non-residential uses closer to where people live up on the hills. And the possibilities for that are limited, and the ones that we've identified on this map are some of the larger parcels that are currently occupied by non-residential uses in these areas.
Yeah, this, Bob just whispered, I mean, Trinity Church is on the corner of Alameda and Britain. So how does that get sort of randomly chosen?
Well, again, we were looking at larger parcels that were existing non-residential uses that we thought within the 20-year planning horizon of this plan might have the possibility to convert to a different use.
If they turned over, or in the event that they turned over, the zoning would go into effect?
Well, if the city council were to decide to adopt this land use designation as part of its general plan, those churches would effectively become a non-conforming use. And if they wanted to relocate, then that land would become available for...
If they wanted to relocate?
Yeah.
So just, okay. So
Yeah, there's no eminent domain authority or anything like that.
Okay. And a quick question before you, because it sounds like we're going to go on to the next one. Or I don't know, how do you want to format this out? 'Cause I'm sure
Fine, I think it's going just fine. You can ask. It's open. Yeah.
So the question I have is, for the one area, whenever, we get into zoning or ordinance codes that get more and more restrictive, when we go to building construction designation, I mean, potentially that leaves a vacant site or we have to do a conditional use permit. In other words, it feels like it's going from a general to specific use. And I thought in general we try to avoid those kinds of designations.
The idea to introduce this more restrictive land use designation was a minority opinion, and we encouraged including some of these more unusual ideas as part of the land use alternatives in order to get some feedback from the general public.
In progress discussions.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. So, land use alternative 3, as you see in the build-out analysis table in your packet, has the greatest amount of population growth and the greatest amount of potential job growth and economic growth. And so what we've done with this alternative is we've tried to concentrate all of the additional residential growth on the west side in downtown. So in order to facilitate that, we created 2 land use designations that would allow densities of up to 80 dwelling units per acre. And there was a lot of discussion and debate within the GPAC about what are the maximum densities that we want to talk about. There are some people who felt that you should sort of keep it more as it is, and there are other people who felt that 80 isn't even enough. We should go to 100. We should go to 120. That we really need to concentrate population growth close to existing services and close to existing transit networks. So what we sort of came up with sort of as a compromise in our land use alternative was creating these 2 areas of high-density residential, which would allow up to 80 dwelling units per acre. And in our analysis of the existing zoning codes and development regulations, to achieve those densities, we think right now that it probably would require an increase in the maximum allowable height and a decrease in the parking requirements for projects. So one of the things that became clear as we were sort of analyzing these alternatives is that in order to achieve some of these densities that people may want near transit, it may require relaxing some of the development standards that people feel are important in order to maintain the existing community character. So there's definitely a lot of trade-offs with that. And so also in alternative 3, along this same theme of concentrating development on the on the west side is we have high-density mixed use located through much of downtown as well as El Camino Real. And so another highlight of Alternative 3 is, you can see here, this is probably a familiar shape to you. This is the full implementation of the Economic Development Plan in terms of redesignating land that's currently industrial as regional retail in order to accommodate mid-plate and large plate retail into the city. And another highlight of this alternative is redesignating Holly Street as multifamily residential and applying what we call the gateway overlay designation. And there's a lot of conversation within the GPAC about what do we do about Holly Street. There are feelings among GPAC members that because of the PAMF project that there's going to be a necessity to widen Holly Street, potentially reconfigure Holly Street. So if we're planning for the next 20 years as part of this general plan update, we can't ignore what's going to happen to Holly Street. There are GPAC members who felt that single-family residential uses just are not tenable there over the long term and wanted to see an alternative land use designation, as well as some sort of plan in order to develop more of a sort of, say, streetscape or other physical improvements to create a more welcoming gateway into the city. So that's what this gateway overlay designation is all about.
In the breakout close-ups of that, there was a gateway overlay district. Can you explain what that was?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess I was using the term designation, and I should have been using the term district. But what that means is that in the general plan, we're going to have specific policies about what the city should do in order to create sort of a more welcoming and attractive gateway into the city along Holly Street. And probably associated with that overlay district is that there will be some specific implementation measures in order to develop a specific conceptual roadway design in order to accommodate a reconfigured Holly Street if that happens.
I have a question on that, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I know Holly is, our only full interchange now, but if we're looking at something 20, 30 years down the road, will that necessarily be the case? I know, Caltrans has certain policies in place that limit, but has there been any discussion about, and let me ask another question to go along with this. Has there been any discussion of, say, Britain, and has there been any discussion of, the goal of the general plan or the leverage, really, of the general plan? If you stated in your general plan that, we want our gateway really to be Britain, does that not create some political will on our part as a city? It says to higher authorities, look, you're telling us one thing, we want to be something else. This is in our general plan. This is where we want to go.
I think that issue came up at a meeting that I wasn't present at. And I think the sort of conclusion that we came to is that the present interchange pattern along 101 that passes through San Carlos is here to stay for the duration of this plan.
Okay.
I think that's an idea, though.
I'm not comfortable with that, but okay.
Yeah. Talking about Britain.
I was just going to make one comment through the chair about Britain. When we did the interchange at Britain and 101 and talked to Redwood City and Caltrans about that, Redwood City indicated that because the other side of Britain is wetlands, that they would not entertain a full interchange at that location. And so that helped drive what's there today. So I think clearly there are some restrictions both in terms of land use in our neighboring city and also Caltrans policies.
With the salt area considerations that Redwood City is currently considering, does that change their disposition on that? Because I know that I think the council is considering some conversion of salt pond areas of the bay, if I'm not mistaken.
We could certainly look into that, but I'm not aware of that.
Can I have an answer to my second question, which is, regardless of what Mr. Mora told us about what happened in the past, can your general plan be used as a way to send a message to other agencies and higher authorities and so forth to say, look, this, we put this out to the public and had discussion on it, and this is what and how we want it to be. Whether or not you agree with it, Mr. Governor or whomever, we don't really care. This is our general plan. This is what we want to be, and then you use that as political leverage. I would also address that question to, I know you've had some discussion at the GPAC level, but in regards to, population growth. I know there's been discussion there at the GPAC level. Some want to see more, some less. You've mentioned that. I suppose we're allowed to say with our general plan, this is who and what we want to be, despite the fact that ABAG may be giving us certain numbers and the state's giving us certain numbers. We don't care. This is San Carlos. This is who we want to be. We're, as Mr. Savay said earlier, we live here. We're the experts.
Yes, you're absolutely correct on both points.
I'm glad to hear that.
Okay. And so just to wrap up, alternative 3, continuing with these sort of satellite study areas, more in the western portion. Under this alternative, we're looking at neighborhood retail as opposed to mixed use, to look at an option there. So I do want to, I'm going to move away from these maps right now to say a few additional words. Would you like to ask any additional questions on these maps while we have them up?
I think you can proceed. It's
Okay,
safe to say that
so
we'll pipe in. Al, how are we doing time-wise?
Well, 10:45, so we're still good.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I knew that part. What I was wondering is if you knew the sort of the length of overall presentation for discussion.
Since this is a study session, we wanted to kind of give that back to you and just say, well, what do you want to talk about too? I mean, we don't want to dominate the conversation this late at night either. And so if there's any specific topics you'd like us to address, we can certainly address those. Ben may have just a couple of quick pieces that he wants to get forward to the council, but we're here really to have dialogue with you if necessary.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I may? One of the things I'm struggling with here is it is late. We have heard, I've heard as the, what am I, the liaison?
Yes.
Between, this man back here and his committee and the council. And I have not said a whole lot to the council necessarily, but and I think we're getting plenty of messages from certain members of GPAC. Or am I the only one getting these emails?
I think a lot of.
All right. So where I'm going with this is it is a late hour. I'm not sure my mind's working to be able to really get into this and make comments. I'm kind of wondering if it wouldn't be too much to ask that we schedule, we've had this introduction of this. I don't want to short play this, and I would consider having a study session that we schedule where we just do this and it not be on a council night, that we go ahead and schedule a special meeting of the council to kind of look at this and give some feedback. Maybe not, but I've quite frankly, I have just a few sort of, he talked about, bird's eye view. I got a few big global things I wanted to comment on. I wasn't necessarily prepared to get into the details and move this around because I think we'll have a chance to do that later, but what do you think?
I think it's a good point. I mean, from the standpoint of this is important, and this is one of the reasons we're trying to do this, is to make sure council has some input along the way. Given the unfortunate hour, as things have progressed on, I don't want us to give short shrift to this because I think it is important for us to look at and ask some questions and also venture ideas and see how if they've been vetted or not vetted, and then you guys can actually bring them back and continue to look at them. So I guess what I might propose to that end, hearing Randy sort of also non-verbally assent to
spilling coffee all over the
his why don't we continue on to give us some of the detail that's in this, so explaining what's in the report and what's here. We can continue to look at it, and then we'll discuss either, if not an independent evening, maybe one of our study sessions, start a council meeting a little bit later sometime and get a couple things in advance of the meeting when we're fresh. How's that sound, Al? Council, does that sound like I've got a couple of nodding.
Through the chair, honestly, it is such it's a late evening. When I looked at this originally and I saw this was 12A, I had a real difficult time with this because I sort of anticipated, unfortunately, what was going to happen. And I just, this is all, column A, column B, column C, these maps all look alike. They looked alike before 11 o'clock to me. And quite honestly, I don't know what the purpose of this was to have this tonight at 11 o'clock at night, but I think it's not accomplishing the purpose. And as good a speaker as you are, sir, I'm not getting much out of this. And so, I mean, maybe it's Mr. Cranky again after 10:30. That's my job. But I agree with Mr. Grocott that I think we either schedule a time to really put purpose in this, or we just stop this gentleman now and we start asking questions, because I just can't. I apologize, but I can't.
Well, actually, can I just bring this to a close? Because if everybody gets their 2 cents in, we're going to be here at 11:15.
Just 15 seconds.
Please.
Ben, I was where Bob was after an hour, but spending more and more time going through it, I really like what I see, and I'm starting to understand it, not totally, but I think this is a lot of work behind here. The committee, what they've done, there's some really bright thinking here, so I just want to let you sleep a little better. I think there's still some understanding to be done, but I'm starting to really appreciate all the work that you've done.
I didn't mean to be critical of the process.
I just
no comment on the process. I'm just talking about the late hour. People have done a great job, but
thank you.
Okay.
It's just difficult to assimilate.
Okay. With council's pleasure,
right.
Let's just finish
Okay.
going through the material, and why don't we consider this a presentation material, and then we'll schedule another time that works for council, and where we have a little bit more energy to ask some questions. But I think we should pursue on to finish the presentation, and we've got 10 to 11, so let's go ahead and...
Okay. I'll wrap this up in a couple of minutes. One of the components of the staff report is a build-out analysis, where we're looking at, for each of the 3 land use alternatives, what's really the maximum development potential that we think could happen within the planning horizon, which is 20 years for this plan. And this is a useful exercise, and it is an exercise, and there are a lot of assumptions that are built in there, but it is sort of useful in order to compare big picture from these 3 alternatives in terms of what it means in terms of potential future development. And it's particularly important to look at it in terms of housing goals. We have a specific mandate from the state to accommodate 599 dwelling units by 2014. And then we also have questions about what kind of population do we want to accommodate over the life of this plan beyond that short-term housing mandate. And also, it can be helpful to look at what the city's economic goals are in terms of attracting uses that are important in terms of the long-term fiscal health of the city. And also, we can look at it in terms of what do we think the future market trends are in San Carlos, San Mateo, the Bay Area, and are we positioning San Carlos to capture that future development potential? So with that in mind, we prepared this build-out analysis, and I was relieved to see that when we did this analysis, the numbers came out as you would sort of roughly expect for these land use alternatives, where you have alternative 1, which is our existing general plan. It's the least amount of population growth. It's the least amount of housing growth. Yet it still accommodates the 599 units that we need to look at for the short term in terms of housing. And alternative 3, on the other hand, would accommodate the maximum amount of population as well as the maximum amount of commercial square footage. And one interesting thing in terms of these land use alternatives is that the ERA market study that was prepared prior to the preparation of the economic development plan estimated that over the next 20 years, San Carlos could reasonably accommodate or capture about 500 square feet of commercial square footage. And our build-out analysis, which is considering sort of redevelopment, the loss of existing square footage. For alternative 2, we were at 560,000 square feet. Alternative 3 was more than double that. And alternative 1, which is the existing general plan, based on our build-out calculations, wasn't really quite enough to capture the full maximum ceiling of commercial development based on that ERA market study. So one of the things that we're going to do after we've finalized these land use alternatives is we're going to prepare sort of a more involved analysis of these land use alternatives, looking at some of these fiscal and economic issues, but also looking at some of these more sort of qualitative, difficult to measure issues such as urban design, and also sort of questions about sustainability, since that is an overarching principle of this general plan update. And we're going to put that together into a sort of a memorandum or a workbook, if you will, that will be made available. The GPAC is going to review, and it will be made available to the public hopefully a week before the workshop. We'll advertise it heavily. We'll post it on the website, and it'll give the public a little bit of time to sort of think about some of these complicated issues before they attend a workshop and provide their input on the alternatives. So
Very good.
That's where we are.
Al, any other comments, closing comments?
Concludes our comments.
Okay, so council, do we want to discuss whether or not we want to devote a special evening to this, or whether we want to I can take a look at the agenda with City Manager Weiss and see if we can work this into a pre-meeting study session in the next month or so.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just echo Mr. Grocot's comments that this has long-term effect for the city. We've got thousands of hours of volunteer time that have been put into this. I would support having a special evening designated to this. I would also make a request. As the maps are redone, colorblindness is not an ADA issue, but I can't tell the difference between the colors. So if you could add a crosshatch pattern or something, because I can't read the maps.
All right. So does Christine, is that a night you want to try to help wrangle available dates? We can look into that for the future in a special meeting to talk about the general plan. Is that right the way to go, Mr. Weiss? Good. All right. Any other? With that, we'll close on this issue. Thank you very much for staying late. Apologize that it did get late and that we couldn't devote full energy to it tonight. We appreciate you guys being here.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Just one consideration when we schedule our meeting is I think those guys have a meeting coming up, and we probably want to have ours before they have their next one. I would suppose. I don't know.
Okay. We'll keep that in consideration as we try to schedule a meeting. All right.
Thanks.
And with that, we'll go ahead, Mr. Weiss.
Well, I just wanted to remind that if there's energy left, we would still like to meet in closed session to continue our discussions on the labor issue. If not, we would ask for a special meeting with respect to that as well, and whether these two can be combined in the next week to 10 days, I don't know. But we really would encourage some further discussion on that one issue.
We can go ahead and try to schedule another one. I don't know whether or not I'm going to be able to make. I actually work every day.
Is there any energy, just for 15 or 20 minutes, to give us a chance to...
Council?
I can go 15.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Because it's going to be beyond 11. That's all we have.
Mr. Mayor, I move
to talk to 11:15.
Go for such time that the chair consumes.
Let's say to 11:15. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye. And for the record, that was a motion to adjourn to closed session.
A motion to adjourn to closed session. All right.